Hey everyone, welcome to the channel Paranormal M, and thanks for spending part of your night here with me. Before we begin, make sure you turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos. And if you've ever had an unexplained paranormal experience yourself, feel free to send it to me. The first story in tonight's video comes from someone who started noticing frightening changes in their life not long after moving into a new home. And it's one of those stories that stays with you. So lie back, listen closely, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll be feeling calm and ready for a good night's sleep. Hi, I want to tell you about a time in my life that still feels hard to explain, even now. I was a teenage girl living in London, and by then, I already felt like life had been cruel to me for as long as I could remember. I had gone through a rough childhood, a lot of loneliness, a lot of bullying, and things at home were never safe or steady. So when we moved from a cramped flat into a bigger rented house, part of me really thought maybe things would finally calm down. For the first few nights, they did. Then everything started to shift. It was late September 2022, the night before my birthday. I remember it so clearly because I suddenly felt this crushing tightness in my chest. I could barely breathe, and since I'd struggled with asthma before, I panicked. I thought something terrible was happening to me. After that night, my fear just spiraled. I became obsessed with my health. I kept checking my body, watching every little sensation, convincing myself something was badly wrong. It felt like I was losing control, not all at once, but piece by piece. And that was the strange part. It wasn't only anxiety. It felt deeper than that, heavier. I started acting in ways that didn't feel like me. I became angry, restless, defiant. I stopped coping at school. I stayed awake at night with this awful feeling that something was pressing down on my mind, almost like I was being pulled by an invisible force. My family saw the change too. Because of our religious beliefs, they talked about spirits, black magic, things like that. My mother even wondered if someone had brought something dark into our lives. I didn't know what to believe. I just knew I felt terrified of myself. Around that time, my mother was expecting my baby brother, and everything in the house already felt tense. Family members were visiting, arguments were happening, and the atmosphere felt thick, like the air itself was full of stress. At night, I started noticing what looked like a figure in the room, just standing there in the darkness. I tried telling my parents, but they brushed it off. One night was worse than all the others. I woke up feeling like something was sitting on my legs. I tried to move, but I couldn't. My whole body hurt. I remember hitting the wall with my fist, and even that felt unreal, like my body was moving ahead of me. My parents rushed in, but instead of comforting me, it turned into more shouting, more fear, more pain. By then, I barely slept. I was constantly online, constantly hiding in screens, constantly trying to escape my own thoughts. My physical health got worse too. I felt weak, sick, out of rhythm with my own body. Looking back, I think I was overwhelmed in every possible way, mentally, emotionally, physically. But at the time, it felt supernatural. That was the only explanation that seemed big enough. Then in spring 2024, we moved again, this time to a bungalow. And strangely, after that, the intense feeling in that old house disappeared. I still struggled. I still had episodes where I acted recklessly, where I didn't understand myself, where I scared myself. But that trapped, haunted feeling wasn't the same anymore. There were still bad periods after that. I had times when I shouted, stole money from my parents, or felt like I was slipping into someone I didn't recognize. The last time I truly felt that old sense of being overtaken was early in 2025. Since then, it's been more like waves. Not gone, but different. Still, when I came home, things settled. So that's what I've been carrying. A period of my life where fear, trauma, family conflict, poor health, sleeplessness, and something I still can't fully name all collided. Sometimes I wonder whether it was a spirit, a jinn, something outside me. Other times, I wonder whether it was years of pain finally breaking through in the darkest way possible. I still don't have a perfect answer. I only know that, to me, it felt real. The fear was real. The heaviness was real. The sense of losing myself was real. And maybe that's the hardest part of all. Trying to understand whether I was being haunted by something unseen, or by everything I had already lived through. I need you to hear me out, because I know how this sounds. I've lived in this house for nearly a decade, and from the very beginning, it's felt like I was sharing it with someone. Not in a frightening, evil kind of way, nothing like that. Just strange, constant, impossible to ignore things that have become part of life here. Over the years, I've seen full apparitions more than once. Most often, it's been a woman, usually in a long dress, quietly moving through the hallway or passing by a doorway like she belongs here. A few times, I've also seen an older man standing on the stairs, still and watchful, as if he's pausing in the middle of doing something. My partner, Eli, and I have both heard voices too. Not vague noises you can brush off, but whispers right into an ear, like someone is standing inches away. Sometimes it happens in the middle of the afternoon, sometimes late at night. We've heard knocking, banging, our names being called. There's honestly so much more, but after all these years it starts to blur together. Things changed recently when we decided to put the house up for sale. Since then, it's like the activity has ramped up. The voices have become more direct, saying things like, "I'm still here," or "Please stay with me," while I'm just standing in the kitchen or walking through the house in broad daylight. I've been seeing the woman more often too, catching her crossing the landing or peeking around a door before disappearing. And then there's everything else. All at once, things in the house started going wrong in ways that felt almost absurd. A curtain rod in the front room suddenly came crashing down, even though it hadn't been touched in years. Then another one fell in a different room a few days later. We've had plumbing issues, leaks where there shouldn't be leaks, the water heater giving out, little disaster after little disaster. I know houses have problems, I do. But this felt different, like the place itself was resisting the idea of us leaving. Yesterday, I reached a point where I just couldn't ignore it anymore. I stood there and spoke out loud to whoever might be here. I asked what they wanted. I said that if they were attached to us or to the house, they were welcome to come with us in spirit if that gave them peace, but we really did need to move on. A friend of mine, Mara, who's always been sensitive to this kind of thing, was with me, and she said, "If you're listening, show us a sign. Let us know you mean no harm." Then last night, the strangest part happened. I was lying in bed scrolling through Facebook, half distracted, when a post popped up in a local history group. It wasn't even new. It was from years ago, and somehow I had never seen it before. The post showed an old black and white photograph of a couple standing outside my house sometime in the 1960s. And the second I saw them, my stomach dropped, because I knew them. I mean, not personally, obviously, but I knew those faces. They were the same two people I'd been seeing in this house all these years. The woman, the older man. It was them. Maybe that doesn't sound extraordinary to everyone else. Maybe it's just an algorithm, a coincidence, one of those random internet moments. But when you've lived with something for this long, when you ask for reassurance and then suddenly find a photograph of the exact people you've been seeing, it's hard not to feel like you were being answered. I haven't reached out to the person who posted it. I keep thinking about it, but how do you even begin that conversation? "Hi, I think your late grandparents are still in my house." Feels like a terrible message to send a stranger. And honestly, if someone sent that to me, I'd probably never recover from the awkwardness of it. So I've just been sitting with it, trying to make sense of it. And more than anything, feeling oddly comforted by the idea that maybe they were never trying to scare us at all. Maybe they just didn't want to be forgotten. Have you ever walked the quiet hillside paths at the Chinese University of Hong Kong after dark? It feels different up there at night. In the daytime, the campus is calm and open, almost comforting. But once the sun goes down, the trees start whispering in the wind, the shadows stretch across the road, and even a familiar shortcut can feel strangely alive. There's one path students still talk about in particular. Some call it Ribbon Path, a narrow trail that winds from the dorms toward the heart of campus. For years, students have passed down stories about a girl who appears there late at night. She's said to wear an old-fashioned uniform, and she always keeps her head lowered. The most unsettling part is her long braid, hanging down her back and swaying gently as she walks. People used to call her the braided girl, but in some retellings now, they call her the ribbon girl. No one can really point to where the story began. It seems to have grown quietly over time, from whispered dorm conversations, nervous late-night walks, and the sort of moments that feel small until you tell them out loud. An unfamiliar sound, a shadow that seems to move when nothing is there, a figure glimpsed just a second too long. Little by little, those moments turned into a legend that settled into campus life. One version says the girl met a tragic end many years ago. According to the story, she was trying to reach the Ma Lu Shui area by clinging to a train during a time when many desperate people crossed into Hong Kong however they could. As the tale goes, something caught in the train door, perhaps her braid, perhaps part of her clothing, and in an instant, everything went horribly wrong. She died before anyone could help her. Whether that really happened or not, the image stayed with people. A young woman, a lonely stretch of land, a braid left behind as the last thing anyone remembered. The story became even more vivid because people kept adding their own encounters to it. One of the most repeated is about a first-year student who stayed late studying and headed back to his residence well past midnight. As he walked along Ribbon Path, he noticed a girl some distance ahead of him. She moved slowly and silently, and in the weak light, all he could really see was the long braid down her back. Trying to steady himself, he called out to her and asked if she could turn around. She stopped. Then, very slowly, she lifted her head. And where her face should have been, there was only darkness and hair, as though the braid had swallowed every feature. He ran all the way back without looking behind him, and after that, people said he was never quite the same. Another story came from a student photographer who liked wandering campus alone at night, taking pictures for assignments. After one of those walks, he checked his camera and found a few photos he didn't remember taking. They were all time-stamped around the moment he'd passed along Ribbon Path. In one image, there was a blurred shape that looked almost like a twisted braid. In another, there seemed to be someone facing the lens, though the face was completely hidden. He deleted the pictures, thinking it had to be a glitch. The next morning, they were back. Maybe that's why the story has lasted so long. It's not just about a ghost. It's about what happens when people are tired, alone, stressed, and walking through silence that feels a little too deep. It's about how fear fills in the blanks. And it's about how a place can hold a story so long that the story starts shaping the place. Whether the Ribbon Girl is real or not almost doesn't matter anymore. She lives in the way students warn each other not to walk that path alone too late. She lives in the nervous laughter, the hurried footsteps, the glances over the shoulder. And maybe that's the most human part of all. Sometimes what haunts us is not a spirit in the dark, but the part of our own mind that cannot bear not knowing what's there. I moved around a lot when I was a kid, but the place that stays with me most is the East Riding of Yorkshire. We were there for close to 8 years, and in all that time, I only had one experience that ever made me seriously wonder whether something paranormal had happened. It took place at Fort Paulson, a coastal fort and museum near the Humber, not far from Hull. I went there with my family when I was about 14. I've always loved history, so I was genuinely excited. I thought it would feel grand and atmospheric in that usual museum way, but instead it felt tired, almost forgotten. Parts of the place were shabby, some of the exhibits looked worn out, and the old mannequins in period uniforms were honestly more unsettling than educational. I remember one of the staff mentioning that the museum had seen better days and was struggling to stay fully maintained. At one point, I wandered off ahead of my family because they were lingering over the displays, and I ended up finding the entrance to an underground passage. I went down the steps on my own, and right away, the air felt different. The tunnel was narrow, with curved white walls, and every footstep bounced back at me in these harsh, empty echoes. It felt close and oppressive in a way I still remember clearly. What really got to me, though, was not just how the tunnel looked, it was the feeling. With every step, I became more and more sure that something else was down there with me. I know how dramatic that sounds, but it's the truth. I felt watched. I felt like if I kept going all the way through, something would be waiting at the other end. I hesitated for longer than I'd like to admit. The only reason I finally kept moving was because another visitor, an older man, came down into the tunnel behind me. His presence made it feel possible to carry on, but it didn't take away that horrible sense that we weren't alone. When I reached the far end, there was a small historical display there, something from the Tudor period, but I barely looked at it. I turned around almost immediately and hurried back up to the surface, trying not to panic. Years later, before I wrote any of this down, I looked into the history of the place to see whether anyone else had ever felt anything similar. That was when I found out Fort Paulson had a pretty strong reputation for hauntings. Paranormal teams had apparently investigated it, and there were all sorts of stories attached to the site. People talked about an airman seen near one of the old aircraft exhibits, and there were stories about a woman in Victorian dress appearing near an old railway carriage. The story that unsettled me most, though, was the one about a soldier. According to local accounts, he had once been locked in an underground cell after some kind of offense while stationed there. Staff and visitors had reported hearing heavy boots in the corridors, and some claimed to have seen a dark figure moving through the underground spaces. A few even said they'd caught faint voices telling them to leave. What really stopped me, though, was reading that other people had described that same tunnel the way I remembered it. They talked about feeling crushed by the atmosphere, hearing voices, seeing shadows, even feeling as though unseen hands had reached for them. I can't prove any of that is real, and I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what happened. I only know what I felt that day. Standing in that tunnel, deep under the fort, I was absolutely certain I was not there by myself. I want to tell you about something that stayed with me for years, and even now, I still can't fully explain it. Back in late winter of 2018, not long after my family moved into a small cottage in the Irish Midlands, the whole area was hit by this massive snowstorm. It wasn't just a bit of bad weather either. The snow came down so heavily that all the little country roads in and out of our village were completely blocked. Everything just stopped. School was called off for nearly 2 weeks, and because we were still new to the area, I spent a lot of that time wandering and getting a feel for the place. Our village sat right beside the Bog of Allen, this huge stretch of raised bogland, wild and open and eerie in its own way, especially under snow. One afternoon, I decided to head out there with my dog and explore. We made our way across the snowy ground, and eventually found a narrow trail that led toward a patch of planted forest. The place was quiet in that strange way snow makes everything quiet, like the whole world is holding its breath. My dog stayed close as we followed the path deeper between the trees, and that's when I noticed the hoof prints. They were deer tracks, clear as anything in the snow. From the size of them, I guessed they probably belonged to a young deer, maybe not fully grown yet. But what caught me off guard was not just the tracks themselves. It was where they were. They began right in the middle of the trail. Not from the woods to the side, not crossing over from one patch of trees to another. Just there, as if the deer had dropped straight down onto the path from nowhere. I stood there staring at them, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, and then followed them farther along. A short distance later, they stopped. Just stopped. There was nothing beyond them, no broken pattern, no sign that the deer had bounded off, no drag marks, no disturbed snow, no deeper impressions that would suggest a leap into the brush. The prints were neat, even, and almost identical all the way through. Then, suddenly, nothing. I remember standing there with this weird mix of curiosity and unease, telling myself there had to be a simple reason. So I checked the trees beside the trail, thinking maybe the deer had jumped into the woods, and I just wasn't seeing the next set of tracks properly. I even walked into the forest a bit to look around, but I couldn't find a single continuation. I thought maybe drifting snow had covered part of the trail, but there really weren't any obvious drifts where I was. Then I wondered if fresh snowfall had softened or hidden some of the prints. But even that didn't quite fit, because the tracks that were there looked crisp enough. As best as I could tell, they simply started on the path and ended on the path. I still remember how strange that felt. Now it's been years, and I still don't know what I was looking at that day. I'm the kind of person who's open-minded about things I can't explain, but I'm not eager to jump straight to something paranormal either. I honestly think there's probably a logical explanation buried in there somewhere, one I just haven't been able to land on. Still, in my own head, I've always called them the phantom deer tracks. I've heard people talk about odd deer encounters before, and stories where something about them just feels wrong. But this wasn't even seeing a deer. It was just the evidence of one, appearing and disappearing in a way that didn't make any sense. I know that doesn't exactly help my case. Still, I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody. I know what I saw, or at least, what I found. I saw those tracks beginning in the middle of that snowy trail and ending just as abruptly. And to this day, I can't explain it in a way that feels complete. So that's the story. Maybe there's a perfectly ordinary answer I missed. Maybe there's not. But whatever it was, I've never forgotten that walk through the snow, or the feeling of standing there in the silence, staring at prints that seemed to come from nowhere at all. You know, most people are familiar with the idea that we sometimes see what we expect to see. We talk about it all the time. A strange sound in the dark becomes a voice. A shadow in the corner turns into a figure. A sheet over a chair suddenly looks like something alive because the mind hates a gap and rushes to fill it. But I don't think people talk enough about the reverse. Sometimes the mind doesn't invent something that is there. Sometimes it erases it. There's this pattern people have noticed in colder places right at the beginning of spring, when motorcycles start coming back onto the roads after months of winter. A driver makes a turn, and even when witnesses, traffic cameras, and common sense all say the motorcycle was clearly visible, the driver will still insist, with total sincerity, "I never saw them." And what's eerie is, they're not always lying. In some cases, they looked right at the rider. They had every chance to notice. And then, even after the collision, they seem stunned, like they truly cannot understand what they just hit. That fascinates me, because it suggests the eyes did their job. The problem wasn't vision, it was expectation. The driver's brain had made that same turn again and again all winter long, never once needing to account for a motorcycle. So when one finally appeared on, say, the second or third day of April, the brain rejected it. It took in the image, decided it made no sense in that familiar setting, and almost deleted it from conscious awareness. I think something similar happens in stranger situations too. Imagine someone glancing up at an apartment building and seeing a person clinging to a window ledge. Not just a glimpse, not some blurry motion, but a direct, clear look. And yet later, when the police ask what they saw, the witness says, "I thought it was a blanket hanging out of the window." People hear that and assume the witness was careless or confused or didn't really look. But maybe they did look. Maybe they stared right at a human being in a place the mind could not accept a human being would be. And so the mind softened it, reshaped it, turned it into something ordinary, something explainable. A blanket, a curtain, anything but a person in danger. That's the part I keep coming back to. We always talk about imagination as the thing that adds. But what if imagination also subtracts? What if it smooths over the impossible so we can keep moving through the world without stopping dead every 5 minutes in shock? That's why I think this could happen with ghosts too. Not just people imagining ghosts where there are none, but people genuinely encountering something strange and having the mind immediately rework it into something harmless. A disembodied voice becomes wind through a crack. A figure at the end of the hallway becomes a trick of the light. A presence becomes just the house settling. And then later, we say the imagination caused the haunting, when maybe the imagination was actually the cover story. And if we can do that with joyful things, ordinary things, even familiar things, then why wouldn't we do it with something deeply unsettling? So when I hear stories about apparitions, voices, or impossible moments, I don't automatically assume people are making things up because they wanted to believe. Sometimes I wonder if the opposite happened. Sometimes I wonder whether they really did see something extraordinary, and their mind worked desperately, lovingly, almost protectively, to turn it into something else. Not because they were foolish, because they were human. I want to tell you about a few moments from my life that still stay with me, even now. They're the kind of memories that come back late at night, the kind you try to explain away with logic, and somehow never fully can. The first happened a few years ago, when my family and I stayed in this old gatehouse in England called Tixall Gatehouse. It was me, my parents, and my 2 brothers, and even though the place had several levels, we all decided to sleep on the same floor because it just felt more comfortable that way. The floor above us was this huge empty hall with barely anything in it except an old table game set in the middle, which somehow made it feel even stranger. Earlier that evening, I'd been reading through the guest book, and page after page had little notes from people saying they'd heard footsteps, voices, or felt like they weren't alone. I remember laughing it off at first, because old buildings creak, don't they? They settle, they groan, they make noise. But then sometime around 3 in the morning, while everyone else was asleep, I was still awake. I've never been a great sleeper, and out of nowhere, I heard it. Heavy footsteps. Not a creak, not a little shuffle. Proper, deliberate footsteps crossing the hall above us. Loud enough that I could make out each one clearly. It went on for maybe 10 seconds, maybe a little more, but it felt much longer when I was lying there frozen, listening. What really unsettled me was that a couple had written in the guest book that they'd heard the exact same thing from the same bedroom. I'm not easily frightened, But that night I turned the radio on just to have some company, and I didn't sleep again until morning. The second one happened on New Year's Eve, or technically New Year's morning, years ago. We were driving a friend of mine home after a party that had been disappointingly dull, so none of us were exactly wild or out of control. My mate Callum was driving, stone cold sober, and I'd barely had anything myself. We were on a stretch of the A5, heading through this well-lit road, just chatting nonsense like friends do when it's late, and you're all tired but still buzzing a little. I was sitting in the middle of the back seat, half listening to the conversation in the front, half watching the road ahead. Then suddenly, this man was just there. Not walking into the road, not stumbling out from the side, just there, right in front of the car. Callum swerved hard, and all of us jolted with it. But the part that still makes my skin crawl is that the man didn't react at all. He didn't turn his head, didn't flinch, didn't even seem aware that a car had nearly hit him. It was like he was in his own world. We all twisted around to look back, and there was no one there. Nothing. No figure, no movement, no sign anyone had even been on the road. We still talk about that night now, all these years later, because none of us has ever come up with an explanation that feels right. The third story goes back to when I was 16, just after finishing my exams. A friend of mine lived in a village where everyone talked about this one abandoned house out in the fields. Locals swore it was haunted. I'd heard bits and pieces, then looked into it, and found out it had once been kennels, and a woman had died there alone. It was so isolated that nobody found her for quite some time. You can imagine what that sort of story does to a group of bored teenagers. That night, though, everything changed. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I woke up needing the toilet. The others were asleep, and I remember stepping out of the tent and glancing toward the house. In one of the upstairs windows, there was a light. A soft, flickering light, like a candle. And behind it, I could see the shape of someone moving slowly across the room. I honestly thought there must be a person in there, so I shook my friends awake and told them to look. They were annoyed at first, half asleep and grumbling, but then they saw it too. All 4 of us stood there watching this candlelight drift from one side of the room to the other, as if someone was walking around inside. After what we'd seen earlier that day, we knew that house had been empty. I was terrified, properly terrified. In the end, I rang my dad in the middle of the night and told him I was leaving the tent and waiting somewhere else until daylight. I didn't care how ridiculous I sounded. I just needed to be away from that field. The last one is the story my family still talks about the most, because it felt personal. My granddad had passed away a couple of years earlier, and one weekend my parents were meant to be going away for their anniversary. They were heading to Paris, and my older brother and I were staying with my grandmother. I was about 6 at the time, and my brother Ryan was a few years older than me. In the middle of that first night, I woke up suddenly because I felt a firm push on my shoulder, strong enough to jolt me awake. I remember sitting straight up, thinking it must have been Ryan messing with me, but he wasn't there. The room was quiet. Nothing moved. I just lay there in the dark, wide awake, trying to make sense of it. A little while later, maybe 10 minutes, maybe more, I saw my grandmother hurry past the bedroom door and rush downstairs. I stayed awake for ages after that, too scared and confused to settle. Then, before morning, my dad arrived back unexpectedly. My parents hadn't even made it properly into Paris before they got the call. My grandmother had suffered a heart attack. The strangest part came the next morning, when my brother told Mum and Dad that he'd also been woken in the night. He said someone had pushed his shoulder and whispered in his ear, but when he looked around, there was no one there. Neither of us had said anything to each other before that. We were just children, and we both described almost the same thing. People always say they think it was my granddad, somehow warning us, somehow waking us up. I don't know what I believe, not completely. But I do know that every person in my family remembers that night clearly, and none of us has ever forgotten how it felt. I can still explain away bits and pieces of these stories if I try hard enough. Old houses make noise, roads play tricks on your eyes, teenagers scare themselves, children dream strange things. But even with all that said, there's still a part of me that remembers exactly how real each moment felt. And that's the part I can never quite reason away. So here's something I still can't fully explain. A while back, in late summer of 2019, my partner Evan and I went out for a walk around our neighborhood after having a few friends over for board games. It was one of those soft, warm nights that makes everything feel a little enchanted. After everyone left, we stepped outside just to enjoy it. The streets were quiet, the air felt perfect, and the flowers in the dark looked almost unreal, like the whole neighborhood had turned into a dream. We wandered for a while, just talking and taking our time. It must have been close to midnight when we stopped at the corner near this big old white church in our neighborhood in southeast Portland. What stood out was how bright that block was. The church had this newer building beside it, and both places were lit up so well that the whole corner almost glowed. We stood there for several minutes, just chatting and deciding which way to go next. Then, as we finally turned to leave, I noticed someone across the street. At first, I assumed it was just a person standing near a tree by the sidewalk. They seemed to be wearing a dark hooded sweatshirt and lighter pants, kind of slouched forward, swaying a little. My brain did what brains do, I guess. I tried to explain it away immediately. Maybe someone drunk. Maybe someone trying not to be noticed. Maybe I'd just somehow missed them before. But the longer I looked, the less any of those explanations made sense. I had been standing there for several minutes already. That whole block was brightly lit. If someone had been there the whole time, I should have seen them. And yet I hadn't. Not until that exact moment. I kept looking for several seconds, long enough to be certain I wasn't imagining it. Then I looked away, because staring at a stranger for that long felt wrong. But this awful fear had already started building inside me, fast and physical, like my whole body knew something before my mind could catch up. A second later, I looked back, and the figure was gone. Not gone in a normal way, like someone stepping behind something or walking off. It was more like what I had seen had dissolved back into the tree and the darkness around it. The pale part seemed to blend into the trunk, and the darker part just stretched into shadow. Even now, trying to describe it makes me feel strange. What I remember most clearly is the fear. It was overwhelming. Not ordinary fear, not nerves, not the feeling of being startled. It was this deep, crushing sense that something was terribly wrong. I felt it in every part of me. As Evan and I kept walking, all I could think was, how do I tell him we need to go home right now? I could barely speak. I was trying to figure out how to say it without sounding ridiculous, and before I could say anything, he looked at me and said, "Did you see it too?" That was the moment everything changed for me, because until then, I was still trying to convince myself there had to be some normal explanation. But he had seen it. He had felt it too. I just told him I wanted to go home. He didn't argue. He stayed calm, told me not to run, and kept us moving at a steady pace. I was too afraid to look behind us. We ended up walking near some other people out with their dog, just because being close to other humans made me feel a little safer. We hardly spoke until we got home. Once we were inside, we finally talked about it. The details matched. We had seen the same shape, in the same place, and felt the same wave of dread. He described parts of it before I even could. There wasn't that uncertainty you usually get when two people compare a weird experience. It lined up too neatly. And the strange thing is, I've been back there many times since then. Daytime, nighttime, alone, with other people. Nothing. No feeling, no figure, no sign of anything at all. So I can't neatly explain what happened. I only know what I saw, what he saw, and how real it felt in that moment. Some experiences don't leave you because they scare you. They stay because, somewhere deep down, you know you brushed against something you still don't understand. A few weeks ago, I went on a tour of the old Charleston jail in Charleston, South Carolina, and something happened that I still cannot fully explain. I'm a nanny, I'm 24, and I had traveled there with the family I work for. During the day I was with them, but my evenings were free, and even though I'm not usually the kind of person who explores a city alone, I wanted to push myself a little and do something different. So I signed up for the tour. Not even 20 minutes in, the guide started telling us the story of a woman named Lavina, this infamous figure people say used to lure men in, rob them, and have them killed. According to the legend, she was later executed at the jail while wearing her wedding dress, and ever since then, people have claimed her spirit still lingers there. The guide said she's especially known for scratching visitors. While he was talking, I suddenly felt this intense heat rising in my head and neck. Not just warm, but burning. My skin started tingling, and I got so lightheaded that I had to ask where the restroom was. The guide looked at me strangely and asked if I'd had a red mark on my neck before the tour started. I went into the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and just froze. There was a raised scratch along my neck, thin and sharp, like the mark from a fingernail. I know for a fact it had not been there before. I had checked myself in the mirror not long before the tour began, and I would have noticed something that obvious. The guide even took a photo and said it was one of the clearest marks he'd seen. As the tour continued, it only got worse. Hotter, redder, more painful. It honestly felt like something was still bothering me the entire time I was there. By the next morning, it had nearly disappeared, faded down to a soft pink line near my collarbone. But the scratch is only part of what's been bothering me. About a year ago, I went through a serious medical emergency. It was the closest I have ever come to dying, and it shook me in a way I still don't think I've fully recovered from. Before that happened, I could visit haunted places, hear ghost stories, go on tours like this, and maybe I'd get a few chills or that uneasy feeling people talk about. Nothing more than that. This time was completely different. From the moment I stepped into that jail, I felt overwhelmed by this heavy energy. And after the scratch appeared, it became emotional in a way I wasn't prepared for. It was like being forced back into the memory of that medical crisis again and again, even though the stories on the tour had nothing to do with me personally. I could not stop crying. I mean really crying. I'm sure I looked unwell, or unstable, or both. But it felt as though something in me had opened, like I had let down some invisible barrier, and suddenly everything on the other side could reach me. The guide told me that sometimes spirits are drawn to people who seem vulnerable, and he suggested that being a young woman out alone might have made me stand out. But honestly, I can't shake the feeling that what happened to me last year may have changed something. I don't know whether that means emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, or something else entirely, but I have not felt the same since. I've tried to explain all of this away. I really have. I thought maybe the mark came from my bag strap, but it was hanging on the other side of my body. I wondered if it could have been some kind of rash or skin reaction, but I've never had anything like that happen so suddenly, and definitely not with timing that strange. I'm still naturally skeptical, and part of me keeps trying to find a logical answer. But then something else happened last week, and that's what pushed me from unsettled into genuinely scared. Since then, I've been trying to make sense of everything. With the anniversary of that near-death experience getting closer, I've started wondering if this is all connected to stress or trauma. If maybe my mind is dredging things up in ways I don't understand. But some of these moments feel so vivid, so physical, that I can't easily dismiss them. There have even been times in my apartment when I thought I sensed something nearby, or caught shadowy movement out of the corner of my eye, and I always told myself it was just my imagination. Now, I'm not so sure what to think. I still don't know whether what I experienced was paranormal, psychological, or some complicated mix of both. I just know it felt real. And if I'm being honest, it scared me more than I want to admit. When I was about 8, my mom and stepdad moved us to a rural part of Missouri because they thought life would be better there and the work would be steadier. The house they bought sat near a very old cemetery, maybe a little over half a mile away across a stretch of open land, and there was this weathered little church nearby that had been abandoned for years. Me and the neighborhood kids used to wander through it all the time, just treating it like some mysterious old place to play. Back then, it didn't scare me at all. That changed around my 10th birthday. My mom had me invite a bunch of girls from school for a sleepover, and after cake, presents, and all the usual birthday stuff, we were sent outside to play before it got too late. I wanted to show everybody the old church, so that's where we went. One girl in the group, kind of quiet and off on her own most of the time, drifted away from us and started walking through the cemetery. My mom had always told me never to mess around in there, so when I saw her stepping over graves and acting disrespectful, I got upset. We argued, and I ended up running back to tell my mom. Not long after that, since evening was settling in anyway, she made all of us come back inside. Later that night, all of us were in my room getting ready to sleep, still whispering and giggling the way kids do, when suddenly the bedroom door slammed shut on its own. Every one of us jumped. We screamed, and my mom came rushing in, irritated and half convinced somebody was fooling around. She told us it was probably just the air kicking on, told us to settle down, and walked away. A few minutes later, before we'd even turned the lights out, the door slammed again. This time it didn't stop there. It started shaking against the frame, rattling like somebody was gripping the knob from the other side and jerking it hard. My mom stormed back in, more annoyed than concerned, and accused us of making a scene. We kept telling her it wasn't us, but she didn't buy it. She turned the light off, left the door cracked open, and told us to go to sleep. I was terrified of the dark back then. Really terrified. But because the other girls didn't want a nightlight on, my mom wouldn't let me have mine. So when that door slammed shut a third time and the room dropped completely into darkness, I lost it. I started crying hard, just panicking. Instead of comforting me, my mom got angry. She yanked me out of bed, warned the other girls to be quiet, and made me sleep on the couch in the living room by myself. I remember lying there, crying into my pillow, trying to be silent. After a while, I felt something tug at my blanket. Just a little at first. I froze. Then I slowly lifted my head and saw something I still can't fully explain. It looked like this black, thick, smoky shape, almost hairy around the edges, sliding down the couch. And it seemed attached to a larger mass of the same dark fog that was resting on top of the TV cabinet across the room. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe right. I just watched it. When that thing started coming back toward me across the room, that was when I finally screamed. A real scream. My stepdad came in this time, flipped on the lights, and the whole thing vanished. Just gone. I was shaking so hard I could barely speak. He saw how hysterical I was and told me to come sleep in their room. Once I was there, I finally calmed down enough to fall asleep. But it didn't end that night. That was when the dreams started. For the next several weeks, I kept having the same nightmare over and over. Every time, I woke up sweating, terrified, and ran straight to my parents' room. Then one night, the dream changed. It ended in a way that was so violent and disturbing that even now I don't like thinking about it too long. After that, the dream stopped completely. But so did most of my dreaming. It was almost like some part of my mind just shut down to protect itself. And honestly, ever since then, it has felt like whatever attached itself to me that night never really left. Over the years, strange things have kept happening no matter where I live. Keys disappear and turn up in places they absolutely should not be. Not just mine, other people's too. Houses make odd sounds that nobody can explain. People I've lived with have seen things happen. Objects get knocked over, sometimes thrown. The longer I stay in one place, the stronger it feels, like it settles in and gets comfortable. Moving seems to weaken it for a little while, but never for long. It hasn't truly harmed me, not directly anyway, but it always makes itself known. That's the worst part. It lingers, it watches, it makes the whole house feel uneasy. What's stranger is that when I get really upset or angry, the activity seems to spike. Things fall off shelves. Sometimes they even seem to move toward me. Light bulbs burn out. Lamps flicker. I've touched switches while emotional and watched lights fail right then. My hair is constantly full of static, like there's always some kind of charge clinging to me. And lately, I've started noticing shadowy figures and little floating lights around the house and out on the property more often than I want to admit. So when I tell you this, I'm not telling it like a ghost story just for drama. I'm telling you because I've lived with it for years, and I still don't know what it is. Maybe it's an attachment. Maybe it's something I unknowingly opened myself up to as a child. Maybe it's connected to fear, trauma, or some kind of energy I don't understand. I've tried prayers, cleansings, blessings, all the things people usually recommend, and none of it has made much difference. What I do know is that something changed around that birthday, and nothing has felt completely normal since. I've spent years trying to make sense of it without sounding insane, and that's harder than people think. But when you've seen something with your own eyes, when you've felt it in every house you've lived in after that, you stop worrying so much about whether people believe you. You just want to understand what's been following you all this time. You know, this happened in the early 1990s, and on the surface, it was not some huge cinematic ghost story. It was quiet, almost ordinary. But I still believe something in that old building was paying attention to me. At the time, I had just come out of a relationship that really wore me down. My ex had a way of making me doubt myself constantly, and by the end of it, I felt fragile and exhausted. I did not want noise or drama or people telling me what I should do next. I just needed a place where I could breathe, be alone, and slowly feel like myself again. So I found this lovely little apartment in a small mill town in New Hampshire. It was on the second floor of a brick building that had been there forever, probably more than a century. A cafe sat downstairs, and right across the road was the police station. The best part, though, was the river. Just outside my windows there was a short dam, and the water spilled over it day and night. Not loud in a harsh way, just steady and soothing. The ceilings were tall, the windows were huge, and the whole place felt full of light. Even though it was only a one-bedroom, it felt open and airy, like it had room for me to start over. The day I moved in, I was by myself. I did not have much, just a carload of boxes and small furniture, and I kept going up and down this narrow stairwell from the street to the apartment. At some point, I left my keys on the kitchen table and headed back downstairs for another box. When I came back up, balancing it in my arms. I turned the knob and the door would not open. The strange part was this: the knob itself did not lock. The only way that door could be locked was if the deadbolt had been turned from inside, or locked with a key from outside. It could not just click shut on its own. There was also a wide peephole in the door, with a little cover on the inside. I managed to slide it open with my fingers, and tried reaching in, hoping I could flip the deadbolt back. My arm was nowhere near long enough. And this was before cell phones, because apparently human beings once enjoyed raw inconvenience as a lifestyle. I did not have my landlord's number with me. The cafe was closed. The apartment next door was empty. So the only thing I could think to do was walk across the street and ask the police for help. There were 2 officers inside, and they looked about as busy as you would expect in a tiny town on a quiet day. I explained what had happened and asked if they knew how to contact my landlord. They did not. Then I asked, half embarrassed, whether they could help me get into my own apartment. One of them looked at the other and said, "No, but I know somebody who can." That was not the most reassuring sentence I had ever heard. One of the officers drove me a short way up a hill to a small house. He knocked, and a young man answered. He was in his 20s maybe, and he was a little person, not even 4 feet tall. The officer clearly knew him. After a bit of chatting, he explained my situation and asked whether he could help. The young man said yes, like this was not remotely unusual. So the 3 of us drove back. We climbed the stairs to my apartment, and the young man opened a closet in the hallway and looked inside. Then he said, "Huh, there used to be a crate in here." The officer asked, "Need a boost?" He nodded. I invited them both inside to thank them. We talked for a few minutes, and that is when I learned the young man, whose name was Marin, had once lived in that very apartment. Then one of them, I think the officer, said very matter-of-factly, "This building's haunted." No smile, no joke, just stated like the weather. He added that the building across the street had stories too. I had already heard rumors about an old tavern nearby, about kitchen staff seeing a man in an old-fashioned hat, about dishes moving for no reason. So hearing that did not even scare me as much as you might think. It was more like, all right then, good to know. I never even asked what they had seen. I still do not know why. Life settled after that. A woman moved into the apartment next door later that year, and we became friendly. One day she told me, completely out of nowhere, "My apartment is haunted. I know it is." I had never told her a word about what happened on my move-in day. Not one word. She could not explain it exactly. She just felt it. Her cat kept staring into empty corners and reacting to things she could not see. Mine did that too. Then again, cats are little weirdos on the best of days, so who knows? Still, those years in that apartment were some of the happiest, healthiest years of my life. I got stronger. I rested. I picked up hobbies again. I made new friends. I even started dating a kind, steady man who treated me like I was not some puzzle to be broken apart and rearranged. And through all of it, that waterfall was there in the background, every day, every night. Much later, I remembered something a psychic had told me years before. She had said I needed to live somewhere I could hear moving water. I had forgotten all about it until then. But the moment it came back to me, I just knew that apartment had been part of my healing. And the funny thing is, nothing else ever really happened. No flying objects, no shadowy figures, no cold hands on my shoulder in the dark. Nothing. Not until the day I moved out. That day looked almost exactly like the day I moved in, only backward. I was carrying boxes down to my car, going in and out, doing the last of it. Then I came back up the stairs, reached for the knob, turned it, and the deadbolt had locked itself again. This time, though, I had my key in my pocket, So I just stood there for a second and laughed. Then I unlocked the door and said, out loud, "Nice try. You almost had me again." And that was it. It was never a violent feeling in that apartment. Never dark. Never threatening. Honestly, it felt more like something in that place wanted me to notice it. Like it was aware of who came and went, and for whatever reason, it had taken a particular interest in me. Maybe it was just mischief. Maybe it was timing. Maybe it was coincidence wrapped in a place that carried a lot of old energy. But I still think about it. I still wonder what a new tenant would say if I knocked on the door and asked whether anything odd had ever happened there. Maybe one day I will. A couple of years ago, my roommate and I moved into the apartment we're living in now, and honestly, it all happened because life kind of fell apart at the same time for both of us. He had just gone through a separation from his wife, and since I'd been living with them, that meant I suddenly had nowhere to go to. He didn't really have another place lined up either, so we decided to get an apartment together. His name is Marcus, and he's like family to me, more like a brother than just a roommate, so living together felt like the most natural thing to do. At first, everything was completely normal. For maybe the first 5 or 6 months, there really weren't any problems. We got along well, the apartment felt fine, and it seemed like we'd landed on our feet. But after that, things slowly started to feel off. Not all at once, just little things here and there that kept getting stranger over time. Marcus has been dealing with a lot emotionally. He struggles with depression, anxiety, complex trauma, and a few other mental health issues. And after the separation, all of that got a lot heavier for him. Around that time, a friend of mine who's always been very spiritually sensitive told us she felt like he had something attached to him. She said it had been there for years, possibly since childhood, tied to trauma he went through when he was young. She also said he seemed unusually vulnerable to attracting things, spirits, energies, whatever you want to call them. What made that harder to ignore was that both of us had already seen these shadowy figures around the apartment before she ever said anything. At first we brushed it off, because what else are you supposed to do with something like that? But eventually things seemed to get more intense. Marcus started having terrifying nightmares. His mood would shift in ways that didn't feel like him, and he said he was having intrusive, violent thoughts, and even thoughts about hurting himself. There were also scratches showing up on him. At that point, he asked my friend for help, and she did something that she said got rid of it, though she never explained exactly what she did. For a while after that, things calmed down. It felt like maybe we were past it. But lately, it seems like everything is building again. We've started noticing the shadow figures another time. Our dog has this habit now of staring into empty corners of the apartment like he's watching something we can't see. Kitchen cabinets have been found hanging open for no clear reason, and one morning I came out and several of them were open again, even though nothing had been knocked over or disturbed. I've also noticed strange smells drifting through the apartment at random times, like cigarette smoke, flowers, or strong perfume, even though neither of us uses anything like that. One thing that really unsettles me is my bedroom door. I always shut it firmly before I go to sleep, and more than once I've woken up in the middle of the night or in the morning and found it standing open. I know I closed it. That part really gets to me because it feels so direct. And to be honest, this past year has already been hard enough without all of this. Early last year, I lost my father, and a few months later I changed jobs because the stress at my old one was just too much. The new job is better, and I'm doing a little better than I was, but I'm still carrying a lot. I'm still grieving, still handling family responsibilities, still trying to find my footing after losing him. I know this all sounds rambling and maybe a little unbelievable, but I'm telling it as honestly as I can. I've reached the point where I don't know what to think anymore. Part of me wonders whether Marcus's mental state is somehow affecting the whole atmosphere in the apartment, or whether stress and grief are messing with my head too. Another part of me feels certain that something is there, something we still don't understand. At one point, I even said out loud that whatever it is could stay, as long as it didn't hurt anyone and kept the peace. But if this thing is real, it doesn't seem especially interested in me. It seems drawn to Marcus, like it wants him to know it's there. I guess what I'm really trying to say is this. I don't know whether I'm witnessing something paranormal, something psychological, or some tangled mix of both. I just know that living in that apartment no longer feels the way it used to, and I'm tired of feeling like I'm losing my grip on what's real. I want to tell you about someone I met when I was very young, someone I've never really been able to forget. Her name was Marisa. Even now, the clearest memory I have is of sitting across from her in a hallway, both of us facing each other so quietly, like the rest of the world had disappeared. I remember reaching toward her hand, or at least wanting to. That moment has stayed with me all these years. Back then, I was only 4. My mother was told by one of the daycare workers that I was always talking to someone who wasn't there. She actually told my mom she thought I was talking to a ghost. My mother was terrified, especially because I kept coming home withdrawn and upset, and no one could explain why. Marissa's face is something I still see in flashes. One side of it looked badly burned, raw in a way that no child should ever have to witness. But what I remember even more than that was the sadness in her uninjured eye. It was the kind of sadness that made me want to cry just looking at her. If you're wondering what she looked like beyond that, the closest thing I can compare it to is this soft, glowing figure, almost bluish-white, not fully solid but not invisible either. She was there. I could see her. There was this faint shimmer around her, like light moving at the edges. The nearest thing I can compare it to now is the glow of the northern sky. The strangest part is that we didn't really speak the same language, at least not in any normal sense. I only understood one spoken word from her. No. But somehow I understood everything she meant. It wasn't like ordinary conversation. It was more like feeling her thoughts, or having them placed gently into my mind. Sometimes we would sit together without speaking at all, and somehow I still knew exactly what she was trying to tell me. I remember that when she first came to me, I was carrying something painful inside myself. I'm not going to describe that part in detail, because even now it feels too heavy. But I remember crying, feeling deeply unsettled, like I was holding something no child should have had to carry. And somehow, she comforted me. She calmed me down. She distracted me from whatever hurt had wrapped itself around me. Looking back, I sometimes think she may have helped me survive that period by giving my mind somewhere else to go. Then, little by little, she showed me what had happened to her. I need to explain this carefully because even now I don't fully understand it. It wasn't like watching a movie. It wasn't even like remembering something. It was more like stepping inside her experience. I felt what she felt. I sensed her fear, her pain, even the smell of smoke and heat. I saw a house, though the details are blurred now. I knew she had just woken up. I knew the fire had already started. And for some reason, I had the strong sense that a man had caused it. I can't explain how I knew that. I just did. The fire spread quickly. She was trapped. I remember the panic, the confusion, her trying to figure out how to get out. I remember the horror of realizing there was nowhere to go. Her hair caught first. After that, everything became sharper and fuzzier at the same time, the way terrible things do in memory. I remember her falling. I remember her screaming. I remember the unbearable feeling of heat, though not like touching a flame yourself. It was something stranger, like carrying the echo of her pain inside my own body. And then it was over. After that, Marissa and I were together a few more times. Sometimes we spoke in that strange, wordless way. Sometimes we just sat together and shared quiet. Once, I think we simply looked at each other for a long time, like neither of us wanted the moment to end. In my mind, she became my first real friend. That may sound strange, but it's the truth. She comforted me when I was frightened, and somehow she trusted me with her story too. Eventually, I left that daycare after my mother realized something was very wrong. Later in life, I had other experiences I can't fully explain, but I chose not to keep opening that door. It brought too much into my life, and in time, I stepped away from it. Still, I've never forgotten Marissa. People can say what they want about imagination, about being 4 years old, about memory being slippery. Maybe some of that is fair, but I know what I experienced felt real. I know her face has never left me. I know the sorrow in her eyes was real to me, and I know that, in one of the most confusing and painful seasons of my childhood, she brought me comfort. That's why I'm telling you this now. Not to convince you of anything, really. Just to tell it honestly. Because some memories don't fade, no matter how much time passes. Some people, even the ones who come and go in ways we can't explain, stay with you. And Marissa stayed with me. When I was about 2 years old, my mom got remarried, and we moved into this old house at the edge of a quiet little wooded town. Even now, just thinking about that place makes my skin crawl. A few summers ago, I brought my fiancé there just to show him where I grew up, and the second we drove away, he looked at me and said the whole house in that part of town felt deeply wrong. I didn't even have to explain it. He felt it too. I was a very quiet kid back then. I liked being alone, making up my own little world in my room. That was around the time I started talking about an invisible friend. My mom used to say it was just a childhood thing, but to me, he felt real. I called him Jasper, and I used to say he was a little boy who lived in the walls, and sometimes in my closet. My mom would hear me talking to him all the time. Then when I was 5, something happened that I still haven't forgotten. I was downstairs with my mom in the basement. It was only partly finished, with this small sitting area, a workbench room, a couple storage spaces, and my parents' bedroom down there too. At one point, my mom asked me to run into the bedroom to grab something. The light was off. I remember standing in the doorway, reaching for the switch, and then I saw it. There was something standing on the far side of the bed. It was huge, maybe 7 feet tall, maybe taller. It looked draped in fabric, or maybe like it was wearing some kind of hood. It wasn't solid exactly, more like pale smoke shaped into a person. White, almost transparent. But what I remember most clearly was the feeling. It felt heavy, ominous, like something I absolutely should not be near. I panicked, completely. I ran back to my mom screaming that there was something bad in the bedroom. She held me while I cried and tried to calm me down, told me maybe it was the dog. But our dog was this tiny terrier, so even then I knew that explanation didn't make any sense. After that, I refused to go into the basement ever again. That was when the night terrors started. I became absolutely terrified at night. I mean, truly terrified. I would curl up as tightly as I could under the blankets and stay frozen there, even when I was uncomfortable, even when I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. I was too scared to move, too scared to even peek out. And when I did finally fall asleep, I'd wake up screaming. I still remember one night after months of this, my mom sitting on the edge of my bed in tears because she was so exhausted and overwhelmed. I wouldn't let her turn off the light. I wouldn't let her leave the room. I just could not sleep. When I was around 7, my mom left her husband, and we moved out of that house. But for a few years after that, I still had to go back there a couple times a month for visits. Every single time, sleep was awful, and I still wouldn't go anywhere near the basement. I'm 25 now, and honestly, some of that fear never really left me. I'm still afraid of the dark. I still have night terrors sometimes. And whenever I think back to that moment in the basement, it still sends a chill right through me. All I know is that the memory still feels real. I haven't been back there in years, but even being near those woods or that side of town still makes me uneasy in a way I can't really explain. It's like stepping into the atmosphere of a nightmare you thought you'd outgrown, only to realize your body remembers every second of it. I've been drawn to ghost stories for as long as I can remember. Even as a kid, anything mysterious or unexplained had my full attention. I was around 11, maybe 12, and my parents took my sister and me to stay at the Hotel del Coronado. That was nearly 20 years ago now, but I still remember the feeling the place gave me the moment we arrived. It was beautiful, of course, but there was something else in the air too. Something heavy. Not exactly bad, just unsettling in a way that made my skin prickle. At the same time, I was thrilled. The old-fashioned elevators were still running then, with an attendant operating them, and downstairs there were little shops and long hallways that felt charming and eerie all at once. I especially remember one lower-level corridor that gave me the strangest feeling, like I wasn't supposed to linger there too long. I kept asking my parents if the hotel had any ghost stories attached to it, or if anyone had ever seen anything unusual there. They didn't really know, so we went to the front desk and asked. The staff handed me a brochure about a woman said to haunt the hotel grounds. Her name, according to the story, was Katie Morgan. She had come to the hotel many years earlier, sometime around the turn of the century, and she was supposedly waiting for a man she loved. After several days alone, she died from what people believed was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. I remember reading that it happened somewhere near the steps leading from the hotel down toward the beach. I was completely hooked. I must have read that brochure 5 or 6 times. Later, back in our room, my family was settling in for the evening. My dad decided to go down the hall to get a bucket of ice, and when he stepped out, he left the door cracked open. My mom, my sister, and I were each lying quietly on the beds, reading. Then, all at once, the whole atmosphere changed. I remember feeling this sudden chill move through the room, sharp enough that I actually looked up. And before I could say anything, the door slammed shut with this violent bang. Not a soft swing, not a draft nudging it closed. It slammed. Hard. Loud enough to make all 3 of us jump. A few seconds later, my dad came back and found the door shut and the 3 of us just staring at it, completely shaken. He laughed and said something like, "What happened in here? Did a ghost stop by?" And the second he said it, my stomach dropped. I was a pretty logical kid, even then, and I wanted there to be a normal explanation. I got up and tried pushing the door myself to see if maybe it had just caught the right angle, but it only drifted gently. I checked for windows, for air coming through somewhere, for anything that might explain that kind of force. But everything was closed tight. It was winter, and I remember there being a huge Christmas tree in the lobby, so there wasn't some ocean breeze blowing through the room. That night, while everyone else slept, I stayed awake, turning it over in my mind again and again. I went through every possible explanation I could think of, and none of them quite fit. I couldn't understand how that door had shut so suddenly and so hard. I still can't explain it, honestly. Maybe there was some perfectly ordinary reason, and I just never found it. But part of me has always liked to believe it was Katie, just making herself known in the gentlest way she could manage. Whatever it was, that moment stayed with me. It scared me, no question, but it also filled me with this strange excitement I've never forgotten. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Paranormal M channel. How was your day? I'm always happy to be here sharing paranormal experiences from all around the world, hopefully helping you unwind and sleep a little better. Thank you so much for sending in your stories. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to catch the newest videos. Now, let's get into today's paranormal experience. Good night. So, I was on YouTube a few nights ago, half paying attention to one of those late-night rabbit holes. Cursed paintings, haunted portraits, all that. People telling stories about artwork that holds something. At first it was just spooky background noise while I scrolled, and then something in me shifted. It's hard to explain, but it felt like a door in my head cracked open. A memory I haven't touched in years, one I thought I'd buried for good, came crawling back like it had been waiting for the right moment. And now, I've been dreaming about her again. I was around 10, maybe 11, the first time I saw her. It was a hot summer in the early 90s. We lived in this little house in the city, but our backyard ran right up against this stretch of woods that felt wrong. Not, oh, it's just dark in there, wrong. More like the kind of quiet that makes your skin itch. The kind of quiet where you feel watched even with the sun out. I remember I was outside by myself, sitting on a big old stump, having this ridiculous little tea party with stuffed animals and a plastic cup set. The air was thick, not even a breeze moving the leaves. And then she was just there. A little black girl, about my age, white dress, bare feet, hair in 3 neat plaits that hung down like ropes. And I didn't hear her approach, didn't see her come through the yard. One second I was alone, and the next second she was standing in front of me like she'd always been part of the scene. She smiled at me, like she knew me already, and asked, real politely, if she could play. And here's what still bothers me. I should have been scared, but I wasn't. I was just thrilled. Like, finally, someone real, someone my age. She told me her name was Gladdy. Yeah, Gladdy, not Gladys. I remember because I asked if it was short for something, and she just laughed like it was a silly question. We played. We poured pretend tea. We giggled over nothing. The sun started sinking, and I heard my mom calling from the back door, telling me to come inside. I stood up, and that's when Gladdy grabbed my wrist. Her hand was freezing, like she'd been holding ice. She leaned in and whispered that she didn't want me to go, told me she was always alone, said she didn't have anybody else. So I promised, like a kid does. I promised I'd come back out the next day. And I even told her, if you see any grown-ups, you should hide, okay? Like it was totally normal. She nodded, hugged me tight, too tight, and then she turned and walked into the woods. That night, I woke up thirsty. I padded to the kitchen in the dark, opened the fridge, poured myself a glass of milk, real quiet, trying not to wake anyone. And before I even made it back down the hallway, I felt it. That pull, like something invisible had a finger hooked under my chin, gently forcing my face toward the back door. I walked over and looked outside. The porch light lit up a patch of grass, and then beyond that, it was just a wall of black trees. I almost turned away, and then I saw her. Gladdy stood right at the tree line, perfectly still, staring at the house. Her white dress caught the porch light like a flag in the dark. She didn't wave, didn't move, just watched. I jerked away from the door and hurried back to bed like if I moved fast enough, none of it would follow me. But that was the night things started. At first it was the little stuff you could almost explain away. my toys not where I left them, the bathroom light flickering even after Dad said the wiring was fine, the sound of footsteps down the hall when everybody was asleep. Then it got worse. And then came the shadows. Not like, oh, it's just the car headlights shadows. I mean shapes moving where they shouldn't. A figure in the hallway when I blinked awake. Something crouched up near the corner of my ceiling one night, like a spider made of darkness. And when I squeezed my eyes shut and opened them again, it was gone. And the laughter. God, the laughter. A low, scratchy cackle that seemed to drift in from everywhere, like it started in the woods, then ended up on the roof, then somehow whispered through the walls. Gladys came back the next day, and the next. Always the same white dress, always barefoot, always those 3 plaits. I asked her once if she had parents. She stared at me so long I felt my throat tighten, and then she said, real calm, "My people are everywhere. They don't sleep. They watch." I remember this wave of nausea hitting me, like my body knew before my brain did. After that, I started noticing things I hadn't wanted to notice. Marks on her arms, bruises on her shins, a dark ring around her neck like someone had pressed dirty fingers there. Her dress wasn't clean anymore. It got stained, then frayed, then torn at the hem like she'd been dragging it through mud and thorns. And then one day she showed up different. One of her eyes was missing. Not swollen shut, not bandaged, just gone. A smooth, dark hollow, like somebody had scooped it out and left nothing behind. And she still smiled, still wanted to play. And I tried so hard to act normal, because what else does a kid do when the impossible is sitting next to them, asking to pour pretend tea? But then my mom stepped out onto the porch. She watched me for a second, frowning, and she called, "Who are you talking to out there?" I told her, "My friend Gladys." My mom's expression changed, like she got uncomfortable, and she said, "You're out there talking to yourself again? Come inside, that's creepy." Gladys was standing right beside me. My mother didn't look at her once, not even a flicker, not even a pause. When my mom went back inside, I whispered, "Why can't she see you?" Gladys smiled like she'd been waiting for me to ask, and she said, "Only the ones I pick get to." And then she opened her mouth. Not like normal talking. I mean, she opened it too wide, wider than a child's jaw should ever go. Like it didn't have joints, like it was a doll being pulled apart. And her teeth weren't teeth. They were small and pale and smooth, like little bits of bone. That's when I stopped going outside. I stayed inside no matter how sunny it was, no matter how bored I got. I'd sit by the window and just stare at the woods, trying not to blink. But she still came. I'd feel her, hear that soft scrape outside, like bare feet on dry ground. Sometimes I'd see her at the edge of the yard, just standing there, waiting. The last time I saw her, it was later in the afternoon, and the woods looked darker than they should have. She leaned in close and whispered, "I'm going home now. Everybody's gonna know I went home." Then she turned and walked into the trees, and that's when I saw it. A huge black dog was waiting for her in the shadows, bigger than any dog I'd ever seen, shoulders high like a small horse. It didn't pant, didn't wag, just stared with this heavy, patient stillness. As soon as Gladys stepped into the woods, the dog followed. That night I dreamed of her. I was standing in this pitch-black room, and the only light came from a tall window. White curtains snapping and thrashing like something was trying to claw its way in. Rain hammered the glass so hard it looked like it was bending. Gladys stood there in front of the window, the black dog beside her. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. They just stared at me like they were waiting for me to do something. I woke up choking, like I hadn't been breathing, and honestly, I almost believed that. Until the day my dad took me to visit his friend. an older woman named Miss Maddie Ray. Her house was full of odd little antiques and dusty knickknacks that made everything feel older than it should have been. While the adults talked, I wandered the living room, and then I saw it. A painting on the wall. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like the room tilted. It was her. Gladdy. Same white dress, bare feet, 3 plates. And right next to her was that massive black dog. Behind them, the tall window with the white curtains whipping in the wind, and rain streaking across the glass. It wasn't similar. It was exact. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there staring like my body forgot how to work. I asked Miss Maddie Ray who the girl was, and she said she'd bought it at a flea market from a coastal woman. Said the seller told her it was painted way back, early 1900s or so. Miss Maddie Ray said the story was that the girl was the child of a root worker, a healer, a conjure woman, something like that. And the girl went missing. Nobody ever found her. The painting was made so people wouldn't forget her face, like keeping her seen would keep her close. I remember thinking, even as a kid, why would you want that in your house? Years went by. Then Miss Maddie Ray died. My dad took me with him when we went to pay respects and help sort through a few things. And the painting was still there, hanging in the same spot. But this time, the girl was gone. Just gone. The window was still there, the curtains, the rain, and the black dog. Only the dog remained, staring out from the canvas like it had been waiting for me to notice. So yeah, that's why those YouTube videos got under my skin. Because now I'm dreaming about her again, and I can't stop thinking about that painting. About what it means that she disappeared from it, but the dog didn't. And I don't know what's worse. The idea that I imagined everything, or the idea that I didn't. So, let me take you back a few years. In 2018, I was living with my mom again. I'd been there a couple years after getting out of a marriage that really broke me down. Being with her felt like breathing again. Safe, familiar, steady. But eventually, you know how it is, I started craving my own space. Somewhere I could rebuild and hear my own thoughts. I applied for a few apartments, not expecting much, and then one afternoon I got a call. A small 1-bedroom had opened up. I said yes almost immediately, like my mouth answered before my fear could catch up. And I was scared. I hadn't lived alone in a long time. Plus, I've always had this weird fear of the dark. Not just the lights-off kind, more like the feeling that darkness can hide things. Still, I moved in, and I was genuinely excited. That first night I stayed busy on purpose, hung curtains, shifted furniture around 100 times, unpacked boxes until my arms felt like jelly. By around 11:30, I was exhausted. I showered, got into bed, and turned the TV on because I can't sleep in total silence. My internet wasn't set up yet, so it was just the glow of the screen and whatever random channel came through. And I drifted off. But sometime in the night, I heard something in my closet. It sounded like something sliding. Then a soft thump, like it fell. Even half asleep, it scared me so badly my whole body locked up. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe right. I just laid there, whispering prayers in my head like, "Please, God, don't let me see anything I'm not supposed to see. Please protect me." I stayed frozen until morning. When I finally got up for work, I forced myself to open the closet, bracing for I don't even know what. It was just a curtain rod that had slid and dropped. And I laughed. Like one of those shaky, relieved laughs where you're almost mad at yourself for panicking. But then the thought hit me. How did it move from one side of the closet to the other like that? Curtains don't do that on their own. I tried to brush it off. I really did. A few months later, I met this sweet, handsome guy, my now husband. Back then, he He was just this charming man who kept showing up every weekend like he was slowly turning my apartment into our place. And honestly, I loved it. I was getting used to being alone, but having him there made everything feel lighter. One day, I went to work and left him there by himself. When I got home, he goes, "So, there was the biggest spider I've ever seen in your living room. I killed it, but I swear it came out of nowhere." And I just stared at him. Because my apartment was always clean. No bugs, no roaches, nothing. The complex even sprayed regularly. Plus, I barely had any furniture then. There was nowhere for something huge to hide. But again, I told myself, okay, weird, whatever. Then one night I was on the phone with him, making weekend plans, laughing, relaxed, and suddenly I heard water start running in my bathroom. The bathroom was across the hall from my bedroom, so it wasn't like I was hearing things up close. It was clear as day. I went quiet on the phone, and he was like, "You all right?" And I said, "Yeah, but my shower just turned on by itself." He laughed. "Stop playing." "I'm not playing." I walked into the bathroom, and sure enough, the shower was on. Full on running. He tried to explain it away. Water pressure, old pipes, something like that. And I wanted to accept that. I really did. But by then, it started to feel like my apartment had moods. Like it was watching to see what I'd ignore. Now this is the part where people either lean in closer or they back away. So about 6 or 7 months after I moved in, my boyfriend, Malik, officially moved in with me. That first week, one night, we went to bed like normal, and I remember opening my eyes and seeing a little girl standing in the doorway. A little black girl, maybe 8 or 9. Her hair was in neat braids, and she was wearing this pale yellow dress that looked like it belonged in an old photograph, like something from the 1950s or 60s. She wasn't moving. She wasn't smiling, just standing there. I blinked hard, and she was gone. I didn't tell Malik right away. I didn't want to scare him. I didn't want to make it real. But things kept happening. At night, in the bathroom, I'd hear a woman humming, soft and steady, like she was doing it absent-mindedly. The sound seemed to come through the vents, like the walls themselves were carrying it. I'd ask Malik if he heard it, and he'd just look at me like, "Babe, I don't hear anything." Sometimes I'd be watching TV in the living room and catch, out of the corner of my eye, this tall shadow standing in the kitchen doorway. It would feel like it was facing me, like it knew I noticed it. And I'll be honest, after a while, I got used to it. That's what scares me the most when I think back, how quickly your mind can adjust to things it shouldn't have to. Then a year passed, and the activity got louder. Knocking, missing items, things showing up in places we knew we didn't put them. I was also pregnant with my first baby, and Malik kept saying I was just anxious, just hormonal, just extra sensitive. Until one night, we were both wide awake in bed and we heard knocking, clear, rhythmic knocking on the bedroom wall. He sat straight up. I remember his face in the TV glow. That look that said, "Oh, okay, so it's not just you." After that, he started changing little things, like sleeping with the ceiling light on. At first I thought it was funny. Mr. Tough Guy needs a nightlight? But then he admitted, real quiet, that he'd been seeing something. He called it an imp. He said he saw it standing at the foot of the bed, that sometimes he'd feel it brush against him, like something rubbing past his body when nothing was there. And then there was the mirror. My mom had gifted me this rotating hallway mirror when I first moved in, one of those swivel ones. Malik hated it. He said walking past it made his stomach turn. Eventually, he started covering it at night like it was a doorway. By the time I had my first son and got pregnant with my second, it felt like the apartment was fully awake. Malik started working a shift where he had to leave around 3 a.m., and every time he left, my heart would drop like I was being abandoned in a house that didn't want me there. So I'd gather everything I needed, diapers, wipes, bottles, my phone, and bring it all into the bedroom. I'd lock the door and wait until sunrise, like I was surviving something instead of living. And then one night, something happened that I still don't like to say out loud. I was in the bedroom, half asleep, and it felt like I slipped into this dream, but not a dream state, like a vision. In it, I saw feet moving under the bedroom door. Slow steps, like someone was walking in my hallway. Then the door didn't open, but something came in anyway. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. It was like I was being held down by invisible weight. And in that vision, it moved toward my son's bed. My baby started screaming, this terrified, panicked scream that snapped something inside me. I jolted out of it, grabbed him, and held him so tight he was shaking. I felt my whole body go cold. I called Malik, crying so hard I could barely speak, and I told him, I can't do this anymore. That morning, I packed what I could and went to my mom's. I stayed there off and on for months, and during that time, it was like we couldn't catch a break. Every time we tried to move, something would fall apart. Applications stalled. Money disappeared into emergencies. Plans collapsed at the last minute. And Malik? He changed. He was still living in that place, still dealing with whatever was in there, and it was like it wore him down. His mood, his behavior. It wasn't him anymore. It was like the house was draining him. We had this neighbor, a young woman, friendly, always sitting with us sometimes when things felt heavy. She had a little boy, too. The last time I saw her was right before Christmas. We talked like normal, like everything was fine. A week later, she was gone. She was murdered. And her mother was killed, too. Her mom died outside near our place. After that, something in me just shut down. Like my spirit said, enough. Not long after, we finally moved. And I'm telling you, even now, years later, if I drive past that building, I can feel it. That heaviness, that watching feeling. Like whatever lived there didn't leave. It just waited. And I always pray for whoever lives there now, because I wouldn't wish what we went through on anyone. So, growing up, I always felt a little out of place in my own family. Not in the usual, I'm quirky way either. I mean, I'd notice things I shouldn't be able to notice. I could look at someone and know pieces of their story, like grief they never spoke out loud, or something they'd survived that didn't show on their face. And sometimes, this is the part I almost never said out loud. I'd hear people, or catch a glimpse of someone, when nobody was physically there. Whenever I tried to tell my parents, they brushed it off. You've been watching scary movies, or your imagination is getting away from you. And I'm telling you, nobody took me seriously. Not one person. But one night, when I was a teenager, sophomore year, I got my first real, unmistakable encounter. This was mid-2000s. I want to say 2006, maybe early 2007. It was around 3 in the morning, and I'd fallen asleep on the living room couch with the TV low. Then, boom! A loud crash that sounded like it came from right up the street. I shot up, heart pounding, and peeked through the blinds. And sure enough, there was a car smashed into this heavy metal gate across the way, like it had hit it full speed. I could see movement, lights, the kind of chaos where your body wakes up before your brain catches up. It looked like a police chase had just ended right there. I saw a figure jump out of the driver's side and take off running, gone in seconds. And the whole thing happened right in front of my aunt's place. So I grabbed the phone and called her immediately. Like, I didn't even think. I just dialed. She answered groggy, and I'm like, "Auntie Felicia, are you okay? Something just crashed out there." She's trying to wake up while I'm talking fast, and then, while I'm still on the phone with her, I hear a knock at the front door. Not a little tap, a real knock. I remember pulling the phone away from my ear and saying, "Auntie, hold on, somebody's knocking." And she goes, "At this time of night?" I said, "Yeah, I hear it." So I get up, still half asleep, and I go to the door. I didn't open it. I asked first. I said, "Who is it?" And in this very low, soft voice, like a little girl trying not to wake the house, the person says, "Caroline." Just like that. Simple. Calm. I froze for a second and said, "Caroline who?" No answer. Nothing. And I'm standing there staring at the door like, maybe it's someone messing with me. Maybe I misheard. Maybe... So I snatched the door open, and there was nobody there. Nobody. And I don't mean maybe they ran off. I mean, there was no way anyone could have left that porch that fast without me hearing the steps. The porch boards creaked when you breathed on them, okay? You could hear someone coming up before they even reached the top. I just stood there with the door open, staring into the night, feeling my skin tighten like something had walked through me. So I shut the door and went back to the phone, and I told my aunt what happened. I said, "Auntie, somebody just knocked and said, 'Caroline.'" And I tried to laugh it off because that's what people do when they're scared. I told her, "The only Caroline I know is the one my cousin Jay used to date. And this is going to sound crazy, but it sounded like her voice." There was silence on the line. Long silence. I kept saying, "Hello? Auntie? You there?" And when she finally answered, her voice was different. Like she didn't want to say what she was about to say. She goes, "Baby, I'm here." And I said, "Why you so quiet?" And she said, slow, heavy, "I swear to you, I didn't even respond. I just hung up. Not because I was being disrespectful. I hung up because my brain couldn't hold it. Like my body panicked before my manners could kick in. I sat there staring at the wall, feeling sick. I didn't even know she had passed. I didn't know anything, so why would she knock on my door? Why would she say her name? Why me? And that's when things started getting worse. A couple weeks went by, and I tried to pretend it didn't happen. I tried to be normal, but the air around my house started feeling heavy, like something was always right on the edge of being seen. Across the street from where we lived, there was this fenced-off lot with thick bushes, one of those places where, if somebody wanted to hide, you'd never know. One evening, around 8-ish, not even late, I was on the porch waiting to see if my boyfriend at the time would walk past. Just sitting there, bored, watching the street. And all of a sudden, I heard wind. But not like normal wind. It was like the air was moving in one single spot, one patch, like somebody was standing there, breathing hard, stirring the air around them. Then I heard footsteps, fast footsteps, running up the porch steps toward me. And I didn't see a person, nothing visible, but I heard it so clear that my body reacted like it was real. I screamed and bolted inside, slammed the door, locked it so hard my hands hurt. I ran past my mom without explaining, straight to my room, and shut the door behind me. I was shaking, sweating, crying, all at once. I stayed in there for a while, maybe half an hour, trying to calm down, but that uneasy feeling never left. It felt like something had followed me, like the air itself was pressing against my skin. And I don't know why I did this. I still don't know why, but something in me said, turn the lights off. So I turned off every light until my room was pitch black. Then I went to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to look outside. And I almost fell, because across the street, right by those bushes, I saw her, Caroline, or something that looked like her. She was standing there, half in the shadows, staring straight at my house like she knew exactly where I was. And the thing that scared me wasn't just that I saw her. It was how wrong she looked. Her hair looked wild, like it was floating even though there was no wind. Her eyes had this reddish shine, like an animal caught in headlights. Her face looked stretched in a way that made my stomach drop. It didn't feel like a sad spirit. It felt angry. It felt mean. I remember whispering, "What is happening?" to nobody. And when I blinked, just a normal blink, she was gone. I backed away from the window so slow, like any sudden move would bring her back. I thought, okay, it's over. Just go to sleep. Just breathe. You're safe. I got into bed, still trembling, and I was trying to settle my heart down when, tap, 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 a knock at my window. My whole body went cold, and even though every part of me was screaming not to move, I got up and went to look. At first, nothing, just darkness outside. I started to close the curtain, hands shaking, and right as the fabric slid across, I saw her face, right there at the window, so close it didn't make sense, and she smiled, this awful, wrong kind of smile, and said, real low, "Hey." But it wasn't friendly. It sounded like a voice trying to pretend. And that's all I remember, because my knees buckled and everything went out. I don't remember hitting the floor. I don't remember anything after that. I just know I never, ever want to see her face again. Hey, okay. I'm just going to tell you this the way I'd tell a friend late at night, because I don't know how else to hold it. My name is Mara, and as long as I can remember, I've been sensitive. Like, too sensitive. I notice things other people don't. I'll catch movement where there shouldn't be any. Hear a whisper that doesn't belong to anyone in the room. Feel a shift in the air like someone just walked through me. I've had experiences that weren't just spooky. They were hostile. I've been shoved awake, cornered by shadows, left shaking in a way I can't explain away. So I've learned to do the usual things. Protect myself. Keep my boundaries. Don't invite anything in. Don't talk to it. Don't react. And it still finds me anyway. This started maybe 10 days ago, give or take. My life is actually pretty good. My marriage is steady, safe, loving, the kind of comfortable that feels like home. We've also been trying to bring a little spark back into things, you know? Not because anything is wrong, just because life gets busy and you want to stay connected. We've talked about it more openly lately, little conversations in passing, teasing, laughing, that kind of thing. And I hate even saying this out loud because it makes my skin crawl now, but it's like something heard us, like something was listening. The first moment happened in the kitchen. My husband was upstairs with our kid, building some ridiculous block tower and making the kind of chaos that somehow sounds adorable when it's not happening right next to your head. I was cooking, stirring something on the stove, wiping counters, that whole multitasking dance. And I felt it. That sensation like someone steps behind you and you don't need to look to know you're not alone. I heard this whispering, soft, close, like it was right at my ear, but I couldn't make out a single word. I turned, expecting to see my husband coming down to check on dinner. No one was there. But the feeling didn't leave. It lingered like a bruise you haven't touched yet. After that, the days were tense. I'm home most of the time with my kid, so I'd stay busy, keep the lights on, keep music playing, keep my mind moving. But at night, especially on the evenings my husband worked late, the air in our bedroom felt wrong. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavy, like the darkness had weight. I'd see quick movement in the corner of my eye. I'd feel the mattress shift when no one sat down. And I kept doing what I always do. Pretend it's nothing. Ignore it. Don't feed it. Then this weekend happened, and I don't even know how to say it without feeling sick. I was in the shower. Normal routine. Shampoo, rinse, trying to enjoy 5 minutes of peace like it's a luxury vacation. And suddenly I felt a touch. Not a bump, not a cold draft, not that usual presence sensation. This was deliberate, intimate, like a hand right against me, as if someone was right there with me. I froze so hard I couldn't even breathe for a second. Because listen, out of everything I've ever experienced, I've never been touched like that. Not like that. It wasn't just scary. It felt wrong, violating, like someone reached into a place that should belong only to me. And then I did the dumbest thing, the thing I always tell myself I'd never do. I challenged it. Out loud, I said something like, "Do it again." I know. I hate myself a little for that. I think a part of me was trying to take control back. Like if I dared it, maybe it would back off. Maybe it would prove I was imagining it. Maybe it would stop hovering at the edge of my life like some coward. But it didn't stop. I was in bed, half asleep, and I felt that same touch again. On the same side, like it had a preference, like it remembered. And then, I couldn't move. It's like something pinned me down. Not gently, not playfully. Like I was being held in place. Like my body was no longer mine to command. And then something happened that I can't twist into a maybe it was nothing. I can't dress it up. I can't laugh it off. I woke up afterward feeling drained, like someone had taken a part of me and left the rest behind. I felt shaken and exposed and violated. That's the word, violated. And what's making it worse is that in the middle of all that fear, there was this awful, humiliating sense that it was doing it because I invited it, because I dared it, because I opened my mouth, because I thought I was stronger than whatever this is. Like it was saying, "Oh, you want to challenge me? Fine. I'm telling you this because I'm scared. I'm scared to be alone in my own house. I'm scared to go to sleep. I'm scared to shower. I'm scared I made something aware of me in a way I can't undo. And I keep going back and forth between this is real and something is attached to me, and I'm losing my mind and I'm going to ruin my life with paranoia. But my body remembers. My chest tightens even talking about it. I feel on edge in a way that doesn't match a normal nightmare. So I don't know what I provoked. I don't know what rules I broke. I don't know what to do next. I just know I don't want it to happen again. So there's this little routine I used to have, and honestly, I miss it sometimes. I'd load my yellow Labrador, her name was Lacey, into the car, and we'd drive just a bit outside our village. Not far, maybe a couple kilometers, just enough to get into that quiet countryside where the roads turn to dirt and the fields open up. Lacey was the kind of dog who didn't wander off like she had something to prove. She stayed near me, circled back often, always checking in, devoted in that calm, steady way dogs can be, like, "I'm here. I've got you." I'd park at the end of this little farm road, step out, light a cigarette, and let her stretch her legs and run. And the thing is, this wasn't some creepy place. It was the opposite. Wide open, flat land, marshy in spots, low brush, a few scattered trees, but mostly you could see everything in every direction. If someone was out there, you'd know. Sometimes you'd spot a distant tractor or maybe a jogger way off, but usually it was just us and the daylight. Still, I'm American, so you know how it is. Even in a safe place, I'm aware. I carried pepper spray, mostly out of habit, and I had a big dog, so I felt fine. But two things happened out there. Two separate trips, same spot, and neither one was scary exactly. That's what's weird. I wasn't panicked. I wasn't even shaking. I was just bothered, like something in me never quite filed it away. The first time, Lacey and I were standing there, just looking out over the brush, and I noticed this small brown leaf. Just a regular dead leaf. Dry, curled, nothing special. Except it wasn't falling. It was hanging, suspended in the air in front of us, at about eye level. And before you ask, no, there wasn't wind. The air was dead still, and there wasn't a branch above it, no bush holding it, no spiderweb strand that I could see, no filament catching the light, nothing. It just hovered there, moving the tiniest bit, like an inch back and forth, as if it was deciding whether to drift away, but never committing. And Lacey saw it too. That's part of what makes it stick in my head. She stopped running and came over and stared up at it, ears forward, that intense dog focus like she was watching a squirrel, except it was a leaf floating in midair. I stood there for, honestly, close to a full minute, just watching it like I was waiting for reality to correct itself. And then I reached out and plucked it. Just took it out of the air. It felt like a leaf. It looked like a leaf. It wasn't sticky. It wasn't caught on anything. I held it up for Lacey to sniff like, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" And she leaned in like she was just as confused as I was. And then I did the only thing that felt sensible, which was, I got back in the car and we went home. Not terrified, just quietly unsettled, like I'd watched a magic trick performed by nobody. Then, maybe a week or two later, another sunny day, broad daylight again, we went back to the same place. Same dirt road, same open fields. Lacey hopped out, started trotting around, and I was standing near the car like usual. And then I heard a voice, clear as anything, from off to my left, somewhere out in the field. Not close, but not far either, like someone calling from maybe 100 meters away. And the voice said, plain as day, "Jules, I can see you. And I need you to understand what makes that so unsettling." Second, the voice was in perfect neutral English. No accent, no German lilt, nothing local about it at all. It sounded like it was meant for me, like it belonged to my world, not that field. And third, this is the part that still makes my skin prickle a little when I remember it. Lacey didn't react. Not even a head turn. If someone had spoken out there, I would have expected her to snap to attention, bark, run toward it, something. But she just kept sniffing around like she hadn't heard a thing. Meanwhile, I'm standing there frozen, staring at empty space, thinking, that's not possible. That's not possible. That's not possible. I didn't respond. I didn't call back. I didn't shout hello like a person in a movie. I just calmly, quickly, got us back in the car and drove home. And that's it. That's the whole story. No dramatic ending, no reveal, no explanation. I'm a spiritual person. I believe there are things we don't understand, but I'm not someone who chases spooky experiences. I wasn't out there looking for anything, and I wasn't traumatized by it. It's just that both moments had the same feeling, not threatening, but wrong. Like the world glitched for a second and then kept going, and I was the only one who noticed. And even now, when I picture that open, quiet field in Germany, I still hear it sometimes in my head, the way it sounded so casual and certain. "Jules, I can see you." So, a few months after my breakup, I started dating my girlfriend. Her name's Lena, and pretty quickly, she began coming over to my place all the time. From the beginning, she didn't like my apartment. She said the vibe felt off, like weirdly heavy. But honestly, I brushed it off. I figured it was just because she knew I'd lived there with my ex, and that alone can make a place feel strange, you know? But then, after a few weeks, maybe a couple months, three things happened that I still can't fully explain. The first one was sleep paralysis. I was 23, and it had never happened to me before. Not once. Suddenly, I'm waking up and I can't move, like my body is glued to the bed. No shadows in the corner, no figure standing over me, none of that. Just locked in place. At first, I tried to stay calm and tell myself it was just stress or something. And I found this trick where I could kind of shake myself out of it, like rocking my shoulders side to side until my body snapped awake again. Still, it was unsettling. It didn't feel normal. Then came the second thing, and this is the one that still gives me chills when I replay it. One night, I had a few friends over, like 3, maybe 4 of us. We were just hanging out, drinking a bit, smoking, laughing, playing music on Spotify through the TV. Normal night, nothing dramatic. Then one of my friends puts on this French rap track, someone he knew, like a friend of a friend. And I remember the timing so clearly because it was so stupidly perfect, it almost felt staged. Right after the intro, the first line comes in, something like, "This new vibe is really dark." And right as that line lands, everything shuts off. The TV dies. The music cuts mid-word. The apartment drops into darkness, and it's not just quiet. It's that thick, sudden silence that feels way too big for the room. Like someone pressed mute on the whole world. My friends were hyped, laughing like, "No way, that timing was insane." They thought it was the coolest coincidence ever, like a cinematic moment. But me? I swear my stomach dropped. I got that cold rush up my spine, like my body knew something my brain hadn't caught up with yet. And after that, I finally told them what Lena had been saying, how she felt like the place was weird, that it didn't feel right. Of course, that made them more excited. They immediately started joking about doing a Ouija board, calling spirits, all that. And I was like, absolutely not. Not in my house. I don't care how funny it is. No. About an hour later, the power comes back, and the rest of the night is normal, like nothing happened. Then, nothing for a while. Until another night, a few weeks later, maybe longer, I throw a small party again. This time there are like 5 or 6 people over, and the electricity goes out again. No dramatic timing this time, just annoying like, seriously? Not again. So we do the obvious thing. We put my phone on the table, throw on a playlist, and keep the night going until the power comes back. Music's playing, people are talking, it's fine. Then suddenly the music stops. At first I think the playlist ended, but it didn't. And then I realize my phone is buzzing. Someone's calling me. My phone is on silent, so the only sound is that low vibration rattling against the tabletop. And my phone is near the edge. The vibrations keep nudging it, millimeter by millimeter, until it finally slides off. It drops. Bang! Loud as hell. And I'm not exaggerating. The exact moment it hits the floor, the lights come back on. Electricity returns instantly, like the apartment waited for that impact as some kind of cue. And I'm standing there, with my heart pounding, just thinking, what are the odds of that? After that, nothing major happened again. No big dramatic power cuts with perfect timing. I eventually moved out a couple months later, mostly to be closer to work, but I'd be lying if I said those nights weren't in the back of my mind. Here's the thing. I'm not even religious. I'd call myself agnostic. I don't want to believe in ghosts. I'm usually the type to look for the boring explanation first. But those moments, they mess with you. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe the building had bad wiring. Maybe my phone falling and the power returning was just random timing. Or maybe, just maybe, something was there, and it really didn't like the music. I don't know. All I know is, since leaving that place, I haven't experienced anything like that again. That was around 2 years ago now. Although, I still get sleep paralysis sometimes. So, yeah, make of that what you want. So, this started a little over 2 weeks ago, and at first, I genuinely thought my doorbell camera was just acting up. I've got one of those smart doorbells, nothing fancy, but it usually does its job. The weird part was, during the day, it recorded perfectly. Clear video, normal motion alerts, everything. But at night, whenever it detected movement right in front of my door, the video would either glitch into a mess of static or just snap into a black screen like someone had shut its eyes. And I'm not helpless with tech, you know? I'm the kind of person who actually tries things before panicking. I rebooted the system, reconnected it to Wi-Fi, updated the app, even changed the settings like 3 different times. I unplugged it for a while and plugged it back in, thinking maybe it just needed a clean restart. Nothing changed. At first, I shrugged it off. I live on an older street, and sometimes the signal gets spotty, especially late at night when the weather's humid or the router decides to be dramatic. But then I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. It wasn't random. It happened at the exact same time, every night. 2:37, not 2:36, not 2:38, always 2:37, like it was scheduled. So yeah, curiosity got me. The next night, I decided I was going to watch the live feed. Not the recording after, live. I sat there with my phone in my hand, waiting, trying to convince myself I was being silly. I started watching at 2:36, and for a few seconds it was totally normal. In the weak orange light from the street lamp, I could see the empty sidewalk, a parked car down the street, tree branches moving a little in the breeze. Quiet, ordinary. Then, motion detected. The screen trembled, like the camera was struggling to focus. For a split second, I thought someone was walking up, but there was no body, no face, nothing. Just this crawling static, like interference crawling across the image. And then, black. Not dark because it's nighttime. I mean black, like the feed had been erased, like someone had pressed their palm over the lens. I remember standing up so fast my chair scraped the floor. I went straight to the window and pulled the curtain back, and I'm telling you, there was no one outside my door. The streetlights were still on. The road looked exactly the same as it always does. Everything looked normal. But I didn't feel normal. I waited, maybe a minute, maybe 2, long enough for my nerves to start buzzing in my arms. And then my phone feed suddenly returned like nothing had happened. Only, something had changed. Right in the center of the camera's view, near my doormat, there was a mark on the ground. And it didn't look like dirt. It looked like the pavement had briefly softened, like it had warped and then hardened again, like something heavy and wrong had pressed into it. The shape was what really got me. It wasn't a shoe print. It wasn't even a normal footprint. It was long and narrow, almost like a stretched handprint, but with 3 distinct, separated toes. Thin, pointed, too evenly spaced, like something that didn't bend the way it was supposed to bend. I didn't sleep after that. I tried, but every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that shape. The next morning I checked the footage. The 2:37 clip was missing, completely gone, like it had never existed. But what made my skin go cold wasn't the missing recording. It was something else the camera captured later. A single-frame snapshot at 4:09. Just one image saved by the system like a glitchy afterthought. 2 round eyes, bright, still, reflective, like an animal caught in headlights. Except they weren't angled like an animal's. They were level, centered, staring straight into the lens, like whatever it was knew exactly where to look. And since then, it keeps happening. Every night at the same time, 2:37, the feed breaks down. The footage disappears, like the camera is being punished for trying to see. But do you know the worst part? Last night, I was watching again. I told myself I wouldn't, but I did. I was staring at the screen, holding my breath, waiting for the moment it always happens. And right before the feed collapsed into black, I saw something in the reflection. Not on the sidewalk, not under the streetlight, in the shadow near my door, where the camera barely reaches. A shape. Tall, leaning, like it was bending forward, like it was trying to stay hidden but couldn't resist looking. And I swear to you, this is the part I can't stop thinking about. It wasn't looking at my door. It was looking at me, like it knew I was watching, like it had been waiting for me to notice. So, my boyfriend Evan and I moved into this house about 5 weeks ago, and I swear it's one of those places that feels normal until you're actually living in it. It's a simple layout, one main floor and then a fully finished basement. Nothing about the basement looks creepy. Clean walls, decent lighting, normal hallway. But the second you walk down there, your body just knows. Every single person who's visited has said some version of the same thing. I don't like it down here. And they always point to the same spot. The back bedroom, last door on the left. People joke about bad vibes, but nobody laughs while they're saying it. It's more like they're trying to convince themselves it's fine. And I hate that I agree. Every time I'm down there alone, I get this steady, crawling feeling, like someone is watching me from a place I can't see. Not a quick scare either. It's patient. Like it's been there longer than I have, and it's not in a hurry. Our first real experience happened about 3 weeks ago. The first night we actually stayed there after closing. We were upstairs, sitting on the couch, trying to relax, and we heard someone coughing from the basement. At first we did the whole, "it's just the house settling" thing, but it happened again. Not constantly, just enough to make us keep looking at each other like, "Did you hear that?" Along with that, there were these creaks, like careful footsteps, not random pops. And then it got worse, because when we finally went downstairs to check, the door to that back bedroom was open. Which doesn't sound dramatic, I know, except we keep every basement door shut. Always. It's become this weird habit already, like we're trying to keep the basement contained. We stared at that open door for a few seconds, and neither of us wanted to be the one to step closer. So we closed it, told ourselves it was a draft or something stupid, and went upstairs. That night, Evan woke up screaming, like full panic, pointing at the corner of our bedroom and yelling that someone was standing there. I turned on every light so fast I'm surprised I didn't break the switch. There was no one. Nothing. No movement, no shadow, no explanation. Just Evan shaking and sweating and staring at the corner like it had teeth. After that, we didn't really sleep. We did that half-sleep thing where your eyes close but your brain stays wide awake, listening. After that, things stayed mostly quiet. If you ignore the occasional groan from the basement or the weird little noises that make you pause mid-sentence. But then there's our cat. We brought her with us. She's usually sweet, a little clingy, normal cat stuff. But since we moved in, she's been different. Like someone swapped her out. She'll sit at the top of the basement stairs and just stare down for long stretches, ears forward, totally still. And when I'm alone, I keep catching her peeking around corners and watching me like she's tracking something I can't see. It's not cute. It's unsettling. Because it feels like she's looking past me. A few nights ago, Evan's parents temporarily moved in with us. They took the upstairs room, so Evan and I moved into the basement, but not the bad bedroom. We stayed in the room next to it, the one that shares a wall. The first night down there, we tried to pretend it was fine. We put on a movie, pulled up the blankets, forced normalcy. But while we were watching, we kept hearing little sounds from down the hall, like something sliding, something tipping over. Soft thuds. We didn't talk about it at first. We just kept watching the screen harder, like ignoring it could erase it. And then the lights started flickering. Not a gentle little dim, like angry strobing. And then, gone. Total blackout. A minute later, the power snapped back on and stayed on, like nothing happened. But when the lights came back, the air felt different. I don't know how else to say that. Before, it felt like being watched. After the power came back, it felt like I wasn't welcome. Like something had finally noticed I could feel it, and it didn't like that. That night I barely slept, and when I did, the dreams were so real they made me nauseous. Violent, graphic dreams of me dying, over and over, different ways, like scenes someone was forcing me to watch. In one, something grabbed me in the shower and I couldn't scream. In another, there was a woman, up on the ceiling, staring straight down at us, like gravity didn't apply to her. And then there was a man in the corner again, always the corner, just standing there like he'd been waiting. When I woke up, my nails were bloody, like I'd been clawing at something, and I had scratches across my back and chest. I just sat there holding my breath, trying to figure out how that could even happen. I've never been someone who sleepwalks or thrashes. I've always been a calm sleeper. This wasn't normal. Last night was worse. I couldn't settle at all. I kept my music on because the silence down there feels heavy. But even with the music, I kept catching whispers underneath it, like soft voices woven into the air. Every time I paused the song to listen, everything went dead quiet. So quiet my ears rang. It felt like the house was holding its breath until I stopped paying attention again. And the dreams came back, violent again, and it was always the same two figures, the woman and the man. Like they were repeating themselves, like they wanted me to remember them. This morning I woke up with my nails bloody again, and a single letter scratched into my chest. T. Not a random scratch, a clear shape. And then I heard knocking from the wall, the one we share with that back bedroom. A slow knock, like knuckles, then rustling, like something shifting on the other side, right up against the drywall. I just laid there staring, completely still, because I didn't want to give it anything. I didn't want it to know I was listening. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't feel safe in that house. Everyone feels something down there, but it only seems to focus on me, like I'm the easiest one to reach, or the one it wants. So tonight I'm staying with friends. I need to get out of that house, even if it's just for a night, because I can feel myself unraveling. I'm exhausted, I'm scared, and it feels like the basement is getting bolder. And the part that keeps looping in my head is this: what if it's not trying to scare me? What if it's trying to drive me out? So, growing up, my siblings and I had this weird normal in our house. Things we didn't even question after a while because it happened so often. We used to see these shadowy figures, not like a full person you could stare at, more like an outline, a pitch black shape you'd catch in the corner of your eye. One felt like a kid, and the other felt like an adult man, just from the height and the shape of them. And the second you'd turn your head to look straight at it, gone, like it was never there. They showed up in the same places too, mostly the upstairs bathroom and the basement bathroom, like those rooms were their spots. And on top of that, we'd hear heavy footsteps pacing around the house, even when we were home alone, or when all of us were piled into one room together. We always blamed the bigger shadow for that. In our heads, we literally had categories: the old man and the kid. And the kid, was a little menace. Sometimes you'd hear your name whispered from somewhere it absolutely shouldn't be coming from. Then this soft little laugh right after, like it thought it was hilarious. Toys would end up moved, turned around, shoved into weird places, just enough to make you doubt yourself for a second, and then feel your stomach drop. And the older one, the man, I swear I'd hear him do this deep, tired sigh, the kind adults make when they've had a long day and their bones feel heavy. That part weirdly creeped me out the most because it sounded so human. Okay, let me tell you the main thing, the story that still makes me feel cold when I think about it. One day, my brother and I decided we were going to decorate our room. And by decorate, I mean we raided the basement like we were little gremlins. Our mom had this habit of buying odd stuff from yard sales: old paintings, dusty frames, random antique-looking things, and most of it ended up shoved downstairs. So we grabbed a bunch of old candles, a couple of those creepy paintings, and this one potted baby tree we found down there too. Like a little sapling in a pot, sitting in the dim basement like it had been waiting. We dragged it all upstairs, set everything up, and felt extremely proud of ourselves, like we'd made our room into some kind of haunted museum. That night, we go to sleep. The next morning, my brother, let's call him Brady, comes rushing over to me with this look on his face like he just discovered a secret door in the house. He goes, "I saw him." And I'm like, "Saw who?" And Brady tells me, dead serious, that he saw a ghost last night, an older man, floating in our room. And not just floating randomly, he said it was attached to the tree. He described it so clearly it made my skin prickle. He said the ghost was kind of bluish-gray, like moonlight on fog. More visible up top, like the face and shoulders were the clearest part, and the lower you looked, the more it faded. No feet at all, just thinning into nothing. He said it would drift away from the tree, only a few feet, and then blink out. And then, instantly, it would reappear right beside the tree again, like the tree was an anchor and the ghost was on a leash. And then Brady says, like it's no big deal, "I reached out to touch it." My stomach dropped when he said that. Now here's the thing. I half believed him, and half didn't want to. But I was also the younger brother, and I wanted to seem brave. So I did what younger brothers do. I lied. I told him, with a straight face, that I see ghosts all the time. That once I even saw something like a 3-headed dragon ghost when I went downstairs for water at night. Which is extra funny because I was terrified of going downstairs alone at night. I wouldn't do that for $1 million. But Brady's eyes got huge, like I was suddenly the coolest person alive. And he believed me, because after what he'd just experienced, why wouldn't he? Then comes the next night, and that's when it was my turn. I'd been watching TV downstairs and fell asleep on the couch, something I apparently did a lot. At some point, my dad carried me upstairs, tossed me onto my bed, and, bless him, didn't bother with a blanket. Just, "Good night, kid. Survive." So later I wake up freezing. Half asleep, shivering, I reach out to grab my blanket. And I see a man floating in my room. Not a shadow this time. Not a corner of the eye thing. A full-on see-through man. Everything Brady described was right. The pale glow, the clearer face, the body fading as it went down, the way it hovered like gravity didn't apply, and the tree still in the corner, like it was the center of the whole thing. And I just lost it. I screamed like something was trying to kill me, and the moment I screamed, the ghost drifted toward me. Not fast, not charging, just gliding closer, like it was curious, or maybe like my fear pulled it in. Then it disappeared, and reappeared at the tree, then floated toward me again. And I'm crying now, full panic, the kind where your chest hurts and you can't get enough air, and I'm backing into my pillow like that's going to save me. My dad comes running in, because obviously, and he's scanning the room like there's an intruder. And then he sees it. I'll never forget that part, because my dad didn't freeze. He didn't scream. He just reached for the switch and flipped the light on. And the second the light hit the room, the ghost was gone, like it never existed. I looked at my dad and I was like, "Did you see it?" And he hesitated, just long enough. Then he goes, "It's probably just a reflection." And I wanted to believe him so badly. I needed it to be a reflection. But even at that age, I was like, a reflection doesn't float. So I asked him how a reflection can drift around the room, disappear, reappear by the tree, and move toward me. And my dad, trying to be gentle, finally admits it. He tells me he didn't want to scare me, but yeah, it wasn't a reflection. It was a ghost. He tells me to sleep in my mom's room, and that night I curled up with them, shaking and exhausted, and I still had nightmares. And the wildest part? Brady and my dad later slept in our room again, with the lights off, like it was no big deal. Like having a pale, tired-looking man casually floating near a baby tree in the corner was just another Tuesday. Meanwhile, I'm in the other room, clinging to my mom, wondering how anyone on earth could fall asleep with that hanging over their heads. So, this is mostly a summary, but I'll try to tell it the way it actually felt. A while back, I got into a really ugly fight with my parents, right in the middle of moving out. I was packing up my life, trying to get to my sister's place, and the whole thing just exploded. And when it was over, I didn't feel relief. I felt hollow, like something in me cracked and didn't bounce back. I've dealt with depression for as long as I can remember, but that argument pushed me into a deeper place than usual. I started coping in ways I'm not proud of, sleeping way too much, shutting everyone out, and, yeah, hurting myself. Not in a dramatic way, just in that quiet, private way that feels like you're trying to turn your brain off for a second. For days, I barely ate. I barely left the room. I'd wake up, stare at the ceiling, and then crawl right back into sleep like it was the only place I didn't have to pretend I was okay. And then I had this dream. Quick thing about me, I almost never have nightmares and I hardly ever remember my dreams. The only time I have intense ones is if I fall asleep flat on my back, which I normally avoid. But this time, I did, and I remembered it. Not clearly, though. It's weird. Every time I try to replay it in my head, it's like my mind smears it on purpose. Like it's trying to protect me by making it slippery. In the dream, I'm lying in my bed. Everything looks normal. Same room, same blankets, same dim light. But I can't move. And I know what you're thinking. Sleep paralysis. But it wasn't that. I wasn't awake. I knew I was dreaming. It was like being trapped inside a dream version of my body. And at the foot of my bed, there was something standing there. I knew, without even questioning it, that it was a demon. I can't tell you what it looked like. I can't tell you its face or the sound of its voice. Every time I try, my brain goes foggy, like the details are behind frosted glass. Honestly, I stopped forcing it. It feels like something I'm not meant to pull back into focus. But here's the part that still messes with me. I wasn't scared. I should have been terrified, right? But I wasn't. I felt calm. Almost like I understood it couldn't actually hurt me unless I gave it permission. And then it spoke. Not loudly, more like it slid the words into the room. I don't remember the exact sentence, but it was something like, "I know you're exhausted. I can carry this for you. Just let me in and I'll end the pain." It kept going. It was persuasive, almost gentle, like it was offering a solution, not a threat. Like it wanted me to hand my life over and stop fighting, and it would take care of everything for me. And I remember thinking, even in the dream, that's not help. That's a trap. The ridiculous part is, I couldn't even respond. I was frozen. Like, "Sorry, buddy, I literally can't answer you right now." Then I woke up. At first, the dream felt like any other weird nightmare that fades by lunchtime. I remember sitting there thinking, okay, that was unsettling. Anyway. But later that night, I got in the shower, and when the water hit my chest, I looked down and just stopped. There were scratches, fresh looking like they'd happened recently. Not deep enough to be bleeding badly or anything, but clearly there. And it wasn't random. There was a pattern, like someone had tried to write something with nails. Except now it's all I can think about. The marks looked like symbols, or maybe Roman numerals. The closest I can describe it is something like IIVII, or maybe IIXII. My memory keeps flipping it around, like it can't settle on the exact order. I remember staring at it in the mirror, trying to translate it into a number, thinking maybe it meant 27. But then I caught myself because Roman numerals don't really work like that. So I just stood there, water running, staring at those scratches, feeling this cold, heavy question settle in my stomach. If that dream was just a dream, why did I wake up with something carved into my skin? Hey, so I want to tell you something that still gives me chills when I think about it. This isn't a made-up story, and I'm not trying to dramatize anything. These were things my family and I genuinely lived through over a couple of years, around 2019 to 2021, when life moved us from our hometown into the city. It was just the three of us then, my mom, my younger sister, her name's Rhea, and me. I'd been living in my college hostel before that, but once Mom and Rhea relocated to the city for the last stretch of my degree, we rented a small apartment so we could finally be together. The place was simple. A tight little living room, a kitchen, and at the far end of the living room, there was this short corridor leading to the bathroom. 2 bedrooms faced each other across that corridor. Nothing fancy, nothing unusual at first glance. But the very first night, we slept in the living room, all 3 of us. And before dawn, around 5:20 in the morning, Rhea suddenly shook me and my mom awake. Her voice was trembling. She kept saying, "Someone's there. Someone's standing near the bathroom." Me and Mom, half asleep and trying not to scare her, brushed it off as a nightmare. You know how younger siblings can wake up and you just want to calm them down. But later that same day, she wouldn't let it go. She said she didn't just feel something, she saw something. A shadow-like figure. And the detail that made my stomach drop even then. She said it looked impossibly tall, like 6.5 feet, maybe taller, just standing there in the corridor. Mom told her to pray before sleeping. We tried to move on, And for a while, nothing happened. But something shifted in the house anyway. A few months went by and we started fighting, constantly. Not normal disagreements. I mean the kind of arguments that erupt out of nowhere, over the smallest things, and somehow become huge. The air in that apartment felt heavy, like we were all on edge without knowing why. Sometimes it would take days, weeks, for things to calm down. Then one evening, Rhea was in one of the bedrooms, standing in front of the mirror, combing her hair. And suddenly, she sprinted out like she was being chased. She was pale. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped the comb on the floor and didn't even think to pick it up. She said, "I saw an old woman. Not in the room, in the mirror." She swore she saw the face of an elderly woman hovering just above her head in the reflection, like someone had leaned in behind her. That was the first time my mom and I looked at each other and didn't immediately say, "It's nothing." That night, we called my dad. He was working abroad at the time, and when we told him everything, especially the part about the figure and the mirror, he didn't argue with us. He just said, very calmly, "Start looking for another place." We tried. Honestly, we did. But it was one problem after another: budget, distance, availability. And since we were both nearing the end of our studies, we kept telling ourselves, just get through this, just one more year. Then came the incident I can still picture like a photograph. One afternoon, I went with my mom to a nearby supermarket to grab groceries. We were gone for what we thought would be no more than 10 minutes. It was bright daylight, and Rhea agreed to stay home because, daytime felt safer. When we left, she was sitting on the sofa watching TV. And then, while she was alone, the power suddenly cut out. The screen went black. Not standing this time. Sitting. Close. She told me later she couldn't even breathe properly. She didn't dare turn her head. She just froze, staring straight ahead, praying we'd come back fast. And when my mom and I opened the door, it was like the air changed. She said the figure vanished the moment we walked in, like it had never been there. After that, everything got worse because the world shut down. COVID hit, lockdown started, and we were trapped inside that apartment for months with online classes. No escape, no normal routines, no easy way to hunt for a new place. The walls felt closer every day. Then one night, this is the moment that finally broke something inside me. Rhea and I were watching TV in the living room. Mom went to the bathroom. My phone started ringing and it was in the bedroom. So I got up and walked from the living room into the bedroom to grab it. And the second I stepped in, Rhea screamed. Not just called out. She screamed, "Mom! Mom!" Mom rushed out of the bathroom, and I ran back into the living room, phone forgotten. Rhea was shaking so hard, her whole body looked like it was shivering from cold. But the room wasn't cold. She could barely speak, but she forced the words out. She said she saw the tall shadow figure move, fast, across the doorway of the room I'd just entered, and disappear into the other bedroom. Like it was watching us, tracking us, and it didn't care that we were all awake. After that, we started praying every day. Not casually, seriously. Morning, evening, whenever the air felt wrong. And slowly, the strange things started happening less. Not completely gone, but quieter. Like whatever it was didn't like being noticed. Eventually, I finished college. Rhea finished high school. We never found another apartment in time, so we packed up and went back to our hometown the moment we could. And I remember my mom saying, almost like a promise to herself, "We're never coming back here again." Because some places don't just feel uncomfortable, Some places feel wrong. And I know it sounds cinematic. I know it sounds like the kind of thing you'd see in a movie and roll your eyes at. But this happened to us. All of it. Now Ria and I have moved on with our lives. We actually left the country and we live in Dubai now. But even here, even in a bright, busy city full of people, sometimes, when I wake up too early, when it's still dark and quiet, I still think of that corridor and the way my sister's voice sounded the first time she whispered, "Someone's there." So, this is one of those things I don't tell people right away, because it sounds like something you'd brush off as a weird childhood phase. But I remember it too clearly for that. When I was little, around 5 or 6, I started having these dreams about a black panther. At first it was almost ordinary, in that strange way kid dreams can be. He'd show up, watch me, then disappear. Nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed nightmare. And then, the second or third time I dreamed about him, the whole thing turned. He wasn't just there anymore. He became hostile, like he'd decided I belonged to him, like my fear was the point. In the dreams, he'd creep into my room and perch on my chest, heavy as a boulder, like he was pinning my spirit down as much as my body. And he'd taunt me in this low, rasping hiss from somewhere across the room. "I see you." I can still hear it. I'm not exaggerating. I can still hear the way it stretched out, like he enjoyed making the words crawl under my skin. That's actually how he got his name, at least the name I gave him. I didn't call him I see. Not exactly. In my head it came out as something like I-zai, a kid's version of the sound that haunted me. And what makes it creepier is that it didn't start in every house. It started in that house. My family had just moved. Before that, we were living in an older place that belonged to a relative, and the whole situation ended badly. We had to leave fast, and it wasn't exactly gentle or mutual. My parents found a new townhouse in a quieter neighborhood, the kind of place where kids ride bikes outside, and you can hear dinner being cooked through open windows. On paper, it was a fresh start. But inside that townhouse, there was this constant undercurrent, like the air was heavier than it should have been. My brothers were tiny then, 3 and 4 maybe, and their room was right next to mine. They didn't talk about nightmares the way I did. They mostly just hated one part of the house with this stubborn, immediate panic that only little kids seem capable of: the basement. The basement itself wasn't even gross. It was finished. Couch space, a TV stand, enough room to play. But there was a corner down there that nobody lingered near. A small bathroom, and beside it a storage room, almost like a little cellar. Nothing dramatic about it, just 2 plain doors. Except every single person in my family avoided those doors like they were hot. We didn't store anything in that bathroom. No hand soap, no extra towels, nothing. And the storage room stayed mostly empty, except for a couple random boxes, like the previous owners had fled mid-unpacking, and we'd silently agreed not to touch whatever feeling lived in there. That was the part everyone felt. But Isai, he felt like he was mine. It started happening whenever I did anything wrong. And I mean kid wrong, not criminal, not evil, just human mistakes. If I spilled juice and my mom sighed, if I forgot homework, if I got a mark on a quiz that wasn't perfect, if I snapped at one of my brothers and felt guilty afterward. That's when the dreams would come. I'd fall asleep fine, and then I'd wake up, at least I thought I was waking up, with that instant stomach-dropping dread, like my body knew before my brain did. And then I'd hear it. "I see you." Sometimes it was from the corner of my room. Sometimes it felt like it came from the doorway. Sometimes it sounded like it was right next to my ear, even when I couldn't move my head. The pressure on my chest would follow, not like a blanket, not like being hugged, like something with intention had decided to sit down on me and keep me there. It didn't just scare me at night, it made me afraid of living during the day. I became this tiny little perfectionist, terrified of making mistakes, terrified of being noticed by whatever it was. I second-guessed everything, even normal kid stuff, laughing too loud, stepping wrong, saying the wrong thing, felt like it might summon him again. After a while, I stopped telling my parents every time it happened. Not because I didn't want help, but because how do you explain that something is punishing you for being imperfect? How do you describe a panther that isn't really a panther? More like a dark shape with ears and a tail, a presence with weight. It went on for months, maybe longer. Time gets fuzzy when you're that small. But I remember the night it peaked, because it was the first time I tried to fight it. I woke up with that dread already pouring through me like cold water. I knew he was coming, before the voice, before the weight. So I sprang out of bed and ran for my parents' room. I tried to scream. I tried so hard. Nothing came out. Not even a whisper. And then, like someone had rewound a tape, I was suddenly back in my bed again, flat on my back, with that crushing weight on my chest like I'd never moved at all. That was the moment I realized I couldn't escape him inside those dreams. It didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter how fast I ran. I was caught the second he decided I was caught. And then, it stopped. But not the way you'd expect. One night, I didn't wake up into terror. I just arrived somewhere. In the dream, I was walking beside him, and it wasn't my street. It was the playground from the older townhouse complex, the one we'd lived in before everything fell apart. The sun was going down, and the whole sky was painted this soft mix of peach and pink, like someone had rubbed warmth into the clouds. Everything felt muffled, like the world was holding its breath. And Isaiah was calm. Not looming, not threatening, just walking with me, like we were two people sharing a quiet moment. Then he did something that still messes with me when I think about it. He apologized. He told me he was sorry for everything. He said he had to do it, that it was his job, like he'd been assigned to me, like he was a role that had to be played until the lesson was done. He said this would be the last time I'd see him. And then he said something that made my whole chest ache, even in the dream. He told me he was going to move on to another child, that he would miss me. I remember staring at him, still afraid, still confused, because how do you feel relief and grief at the same time for something that terrified you? At the end of that dream, he hugged me. Not crushing, not trapping. A real hug, brief, almost careful. And I woke up sweating, heart racing, but with this strange, clean feeling, like the air in my room had finally cleared. I went back to sleep, and for the first time in months, I slept like a normal kid. That was the last time. I'm older now, grown, living far away from that place, with a whole different life. And still, even now, I can remember his voice, that rasp, that hiss, the weight on my chest, the silhouette, dark, faceless, unmistakable. I know people will want to label it. Sleep paralysis, stress, trauma, a child's brain trying to process a scary move and an unstable home situation. Maybe. And I don't think I'll ever fully understand why. But I'll also never forget the way he said it. I see you. Hey, so this is a short one, but it's stuck with me for years. I still find myself replaying it in my head, like my brain never filed it away properly. Back in 2013, my family and I were living in this older apartment that had been carved out of what used to be a full-sized house. You could feel that history in it. 2 floors, an attic space, even a basement below us. It was the kind of place where the floors creaked in a way that made you think you heard footsteps, even when you knew you were alone. That day was totally normal. My son was at school, my wife was at work, and I was home by myself, just sitting in my chair in the living room, half watching TV, half zoning out. I remember feeling comfortable, safe, like the world was on pause. And then, this bang. Not like a knock, not like something falling. A bang that sounded like the air itself got punched. Before I could even stand up, 3 people came rushing in, all masked, all moving fast, like they'd done it before. My mind couldn't catch up. I was just staring at them like I'd suddenly been dropped into the wrong movie. One of them raised a gun and pointed it straight at my head. I didn't even have time to speak. There was a flash, a crack, this sharp, violent sound, and I felt something slam into my head. It wasn't like getting punched. It was heavier than that, like a hard impact that stole the strength from my whole body in one instant. I remember going limp, and I distinctly remember the back of my head hitting the chair as I folded. And then the strangest part happened. I couldn't move, couldn't lift a finger, couldn't even flinch, but I felt like I was sinking, like my body was dropping through the chair. It was like the chair stopped being solid and I just slid through it into this dark space beneath everything. But here's the thing. Even though it felt like I was falling into darkness, I could still see my living room. I could see the TV glow. I could see my body slumped there. I could see the 3 masked people. It's hard to explain without sounding dramatic, but it felt like I was somewhere else and still in the room at the same time. Like my perspective had detached from me, but didn't leave. I don't think it lasted long. In that weird, dark underplace, time didn't feel normal. But I remember 2 of them staying near the doorway, watching, while the one with the gun started messing with stuff on the entertainment center, moving things around like he was searching for something specific. And then, just like that, I snapped awake. I came back in my body like someone shoved me into it. I was drenched in sweat. Not a little sweat, like I'd run a race in my clothes. The back of my chair was wet. My head felt unbearable, like the front half of my skull had been crushed inward. It was this deep, splitting migraine that made the room tilt and blur. I stood up, and my balance was messed up right away. My legs felt weak, like they weren't fully mine yet. I stumbled to the kitchen, grabbed a cold bottle of water, and then went to the bathroom and dug around for something. Anything. So I took some Excedrin and tried to breathe through it. And the part that makes me question myself to this day? There was no sign of anything. No forced door, no mess, no evidence anything had happened at all. It was like it had been wiped out, like I'd dreamed it, except my body was reacting like I'd survived something real. So I did the only thing I could afford. I stayed home, tried to keep my head still, and spent the rest of the day feeling shaken and miserable, like my nervous system had been grabbed and rattled. Nothing like that has ever happened to me before or since, not even close. But I think about it all the time, because I can't decide what's scarier, that it really happened, or that my mind and body could make something feel that real and leave me with pain like a warning.